Well, also earlier I spoke to the Labour MP, Emily Thornberry, who's chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee.
Hello,
and
Chris.
I asked her first.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, all right. Perfect. Hold on. Let me also share my desktop with you so we can like live react to stuff together if you would like.
Yeah, awesome.
Let me also pop you out here real quick. How do I do this? I sometimes forget, but it's fantastic to have you. I've been a longtime supporter of your TikToks. I'm a big fan. I've seen your stuff on Gaza, on the live stream genocide that is being taken place on TikTok. For those of you who don't know, Chris Kunzler is a TikToker. He is, I believe, currently pursuing his PhD, right?
No. So I have a master's and I don't have a PhD as of yet.
Yeah, no. Are you not? Oh, you haven't started pursuing?
No. I haven't begun the process of beginning one. I was going to be. I was going to take a year out to decide what to write it about anyway, and then I don't know. I plan to come to America, so that's probably not happening. Yeah.
Good luck.
Well, I mean, Trump's America doesn't seem like the place to do a PhD. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah. So, is it true that you also studied under Ilan Pappé? Or is that fake news?
Yeah, it is true. So Ilan's lecturer at Exeter. But Ilan, I think he's public about this. But Ilan is between like different countries, and he's obviously a bit of like an international superstar in the sense of as far as that goes for Palestine related stuff, and he's all around the world. But yeah, he teaches at Exeter, and so I studied under him. I did modules with him. He wasn't my supervisor or anything, but we, spent time together. He spoke at a lot of our encampments, and yeah, I did study alongside Ilan at points.
Wow, that's amazing. So walk me through your journey. I feel like was he instructive in your understanding of the situation, the 76 years of occupation and apartheid?
In a sense, definitely. I would actually say that much more before I'd actually even met him, to be honest. It was because Ilan is just like his books. I don't know if you've ever spoken to him or anything, but Ilan speaks very similarly. And his the first ever book I read was just on Palestine when I was like 16, 17. And I couldn't really believe that what was happening. Sorry?
10 Myths?
Say again?
Was it... I'm saying, what was the name of the book? Like, was it 10 Myths?
Oh, sorry. On Palestine is the name of the book.
On Palestine. Yeah, got it.
By Chomsky and Pappé, and I remember reading it first. And
okay.
Yeah, and then there were also, to be honest, I would actually say one of the things is Ilan is obviously fantastic, but there are a lot of people who teach at Exeter that are never going to receive the same sort of like, kudos as Ilan, who really shaped my perspective on it. Like people who are from the Middle East, who taught me about things like Orientalism, who really shaped my perspective on a place that I didn't know and understand. And actually see, the thing is I knew about Palestine before I got to uni, but just learning about the wider region as well was very helpful. Things like the Gulf, things like British colonization there much deeper. And so Ilan was always an important part of that, but it was always like other people at that place as well,
Yeah. Well, you've been following closely some of the things the back and forth that has happened with my former podcast co-host, and I believe you watched. I guess we can call it a debate because there's not really a better term for it that took place on Friday, and I wanted to hear your initial assessment off of it. Because there were definitely some moments where we discussed Ethan's perspective, Ethan's framework, and things that he believes. I feel like it's still somewhat inconsistent with his output for the past year and a half, and I know that you've like paid close attention to all of that. So I wanted to hear what your initial assessment was, and if there's any points that you want to address from the process. Did you finish it?
Yeah. So I've actually watched it. I've watched it twice.
Oh wow!
I watched it once. I watched it once on stream, and then I watched it once when it was live. The thing is that for me, like as I said in my TikTok, there's a certain element of just like the poverty of debate. Like you've mentioned this. You don't really debate people because what the hell is the point? It's not how you change someone's mind. Like all of those tens of thousands of people who watched Ethan shout at you, concede, and also particularly the really important thing is that Ethan conceded right over and over again that a lot of the criticism which has been leveled at him in the alleged hate videos that you watched, that he actually agreed with, but he doesn't agree with it. And I feel like this is always the point of liberal Zionism.
You were one of the quote unquote hate videos that he actually talked about.
I mean, I've always found it interesting that Ethan has made a concerted decision to ignore me in favor of pulling up smaller TikTokers, even when I'd only made TikToks. YouTube, fair enough. Way bigger people he's chosen to ignore. Noah Samson, overzealots, people who've made really, really good videos who he's just ignored. But on TikTok, he was pulling up like random people who made videos about him and didn't want to confront any of the legitimate criticism. Because according to the debate with you, he actually agrees. He said that the IOF is a terrorist organization. He said the inception of Hezbollah was noble. And I think that that's kind of like the key point, because a lot of people, like the way that sort of the propaganda operates, and it operates different. I mean, it operates the same in both places, is where being accused of being a terrorist is the worst thing in the world. And of course, the whole point was, he said, there was a noble inception to it. And largely what someone like you or I does is give context to an organization and say, hey, this isn't just indicative of weird backwardness amongst Arabs. It is contextual amongst like the history of British imperialism and, 76 years of, well, no, actually, I'd go even further back. Britain implanting a settler colony in the Middle East, saying it had
Declaration.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, without Britain, this doesn't happen. And there were it wasn't everyone, but there were a small amount of British people who said at that time, "Don't do this. Don't set up a settler colony. You're about to establish one of the biggest injustices of the century." Tom Segev, an Israeli historian, talks a lot about this in his book "One Palestine Complete." And and so I think that, like, ultimately it was kind of this thing of how can you really debate someone who's just going to agree with you on the most serious points, but then still maintain the idea that it was anti-Semitism? And actually, when I was watching it, I pulled up someone who you've spoken to, Abdul Razak Takriti.
Oh, the scholar that I had on, I think, about the Hezbollah militancy and its history.
Yeah, he did the dig with Daniel. He did Thauer on the dig.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the most excellent historians, and that podcast is probably some of the best Middle East education that's freely available.
He might be the head of Middle Eastern Studies. I forget where what college he's at, but yeah, he's a
I think it's
a great
Texas.
Scholar.
Austin, Texas? Is that a university? I think it's that. But yeah, I pulled up and he was there was a bit where he spoke to me and he just said, "How dare you speak about your feelings in a time like this where, and I mean, I also spoke about this on stream. The death toll is bad in Gaza. It's really bad. But also there's so many people with catastrophic, traumatic, wounded injuries. And in many ways, people view, and there's parts written about this, that there is somehow like a right to maim people and that is just not as bad as, killing 60,000. Those hundreds of thousands of people whose lives have been changed irreversibly, where they can't move around, exist in the same way that they once did because of traumatic injuries. It has a psychological stress on people. And, and people want to talk about, feelings. And when Ethan was so willing to admit that, hey, this wasn't actually, that there is actually reasonable criticism here. Like, for example, I think there was one thing where you commented on my video about when he said he was going to go to Israel. Oh, this was my last straw. And I mean, he was like, oh yeah, I perhaps gave a bad account of myself, but he doubled down on that. He went over and over again why he thought that was a good thing, and it's very hard, it's very hard to have a debate with someone in that sense.
There is it's a technique that Michael from Pennsylvania identified as, I forget what it's called. It's like where you immediately offer like a softened concession on a major point so that if I turn back around and hammer on that same point where it's like, if I draw out the doctrine of surrender, thank you, chatters, where you basically surrender on a major point of contention that in an effort to make it seem as though, in an effort to soften the blow that it would normally have in this back and forth conversation, if we arrived at a position where he made this concession after like fighting back against it, it's disingenuous, especially when paired up with the inconsistencies that concession presents. Because that's what I tried to arrive at over and over again, where I kept saying like, okay, but if you think it's a genocide, then why do you criticize the militancy against it in every way, shape, and form, and consistently point to it as like terrorism? They're bad. They're terrorism, and it doesn't make any sense. And you can draw parallels, as I did over and over again, to historical acts of militancy. But of course, I think whenever you have a conversation with not just like Ethan or any liberal in general, they've already been indoctrinated to this like incredibly whitewashed framework of history where previous militancies that have been successful are always whitewashed in the aftermath, right? Like whether it be the IRA, whether it be the ANC. I mean, sure, with the IRA especially, like there's still a lot of coverage on like the atrocious nature of the IRA and the civilian targeting and whatnot. But like ultimately the approach in the rearview mirror is far more amenable to their position because they have seen some level of success. There's this age-old adage on Twitter that I constantly point to, which is liberals love every single anti-war movement except for the current one, and liberals love every single civil rights struggle except for the current one. Only after it is, all is said and done will they approach the subject matter in a totally sanitized manner to turn around and say, okay, this was good, but only because they were pacifists.
Of course, and I mean also even how people view Palestine now, like, and actually how people were talking about fucking Nelson Mandela, how people were kind of like, oh, he was a pacifist. Well, also like Hamas have always gained their legitimacy they gained a lot of legitimacy from saying we forced Israel out of Gaza in 2005 because of our attacks on settlements, because of the fact that it was too costly to have an occupation there. We forced them out. Look what the two-state solution people are doing to you in the West Bank. Yeah. They are bending over and capitulating to Israel. It's obscene. What you hear lots of propaganda about the Palestinian Authority of like pro-Zionist people saying, oh, it's just as bad as Hamas, Mahmoud Abbas, and all of these people blaming the president and stuff. It is literally an organization which spends more time arresting Palestinians and protecting settlers than it does. And Hamas will always gain legitimacy when that is the exact opposite, and when extreme violence from Israel is the reality. And in the case of South Africa, of course, there was violence from the state, but it was never, they didn't turn the full South African military to destroy black townships, ever. And Israel did that in 2002 to Jenin. Like, they wiped out most of Jenin.
Yeah.
Well, not most of it, but like a considerable amount, and committed atrocities there. And so is it really surprising that like militancy is more prevalent in the context of Palestine?
Yeah, especially considering the escalation of violence, and also the timeline. I mean, it's just like a much longer timeline at this point, much more severe. And also, this is, I think, part of the reason why Noam Chomsky says that, like, at least under the apartheid structure in South Africa, as opposed to like the apartheid structure in Israel, the white South Africans within the apartheid government saw a need to maintain a black population that they were using as workers, as opposed to Israel that simply wants to wipe out all Palestinians. Like their principle is their guiding fundamental principle here is exterminationist in nature, as opposed to utilizing the existing Arab base as a permanent underclass. I don't completely agree with Noam Chomsky on that statement, because I do think that Israel still utilizes the Arab base as a permanent underclass. But I guess I kind of understand that like they would rather bring in like a Gulf nation state, most likely like immigrant labor, in the aftermath of like full blown ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from all of the occupied historical Palestinian territories.
I mean, this is something talked about by Andy Klarner, and I haven't read it in a while, but his book Neoliberal Apartheid talks about how Palestinians have basically just become a surplus population. There was a point at which they were quite useful to the Israeli economy, and they do still, like Palestinians in the West Bank now work predominantly in things like building settlements, a very sadistic existence of you have to build the settlement which is near you, or you go and work in construction in Israel, so the state of Israel expands as well. And they are just a population that is increasingly less useful to Israel. And I think that Chomsky is actually like pointing a little bit to like a niche part of settler colonialism, in that, Patrick Wolf, the guy who's like the main theorist, did not consider South Africa a settler colony, which is a pretty interesting take, because he said that the white South Africans were always too reliant on the black population, whereas Israel from the very start One's was very well. It began in really the turn of the 20th century, but they were interested in Hebrew exclusivist labor with nothing to do with the Palestinians. Get rid of them, replace them with Jewish workers, because otherwise it was going to be really hard to achieve what they ended up achieving, which is, like a Jewish supremacist state with only a minimal amount of Palestinians in it, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, what were some of your primary takeaways overall from like someone who's obviously pro-Palestinian and very well read on the issue, someone who studied this issue as well in college? What was your takeaway in terms of the debate overall?
I think again, it's just this Orientalist thing of basically that some people do terrorism and some people do legitimate violence. Where again, Ethan has said multiple times that people in Israel face crazy choices. The army is a necessity. He's proud of Hila and all of these things. And it's just kind of like, it's very hard for some people to move beyond Orientalism and to see, well, actually, there comes a certain point at which, settler colonies are violent by their very nature. But I mean, one of the parts which I actually just ended up skipping was the sort of part about sexual violence. And I skipped it for one specific reason, which was it was so pointless, especially because it revolved around the idea that you had denied everything when the only piece of substantial evidence brought up by Ethan was about Amit Susana, that you had said at the very start about what had happened, that it was a credible accusation.
Yeah.
I mean, she even said that she allegedly reported it to a Hamas commander, I believe, and the commander said that they would deal with it or whatever. I have no doubt. And again, it's not implausible that this kind of thing happened. It is the key point that is to be said is that there is, sexual violence did not happen en masse systemically. And actually, there was one thing
or directed by Hamas as well. Because that would also contradict why Amit Susana would even report it to a Hamas commander if she believed that there would be no repercussions for what had taken place. That actually also corresponds to another witness from a while back. I remember reading about her testimony to The Guardian in the aftermath of her release, where she talked about how there was mistreatment that took place against some of the hostages, and they immediately actually told a Hamas commander to deal with it. This was what was so consistent with testimony from most of the hostages overall, in terms of like, their recognition of an important bargaining chip, right? Like I have maintained this position over and over again as people were like fantasizing about how many rapes Hamas was probably committing towards the hostages, and when we didn't have as much information. And I kept trying to explain to people, or how they had probably killed the hostages for fun or whatever. And I kept trying to say, like, they will not do that because this is their bargaining chip. I'm not even saying that they're not going to do that from the perspective of like morality because it's the most moral force or anything like that. But simply logically, it doesn't make sense. That's why I kept repeating over and over again. Like, if they kill hostages, you'll know because they will do it on camera, or they will reveal that they've killed hostages, because it's a point to apply pressure in that situation. It's just cold hard logic in this process, right?
100%. And I mean, on this topic as well, when I sort of was talking about this, I pulled up how Frantz Fanon said that the settlers always projected their desires onto the colonized. They would always say, he says specifically in the case of the southern United States, is the white man not always saying that the black man at any opportunity would jump on the good white woman at any given opportunity? Lynchings would very often culminate with mutilation of people's genitals. In the case of Hitler, he spoke constantly about how bad Jewish boys would attack German women at every opportunity. And in fact, one of the most racist figures and reprehensible within Israeli society, Meir Kahane, there is a video of him on YouTube where he speaks about, he says, there are currently Arab boys hidden in cafes pretending that they have Jewish names so they can basically trick nice, good Jewish girls into dating Arabs. He also gained a massive amount of popularity, his far-right, horrific exterminationist ideology, by saying that there were a series of nationalist, like motivated by terrorism, nationalist hatred of Israel, rapes occurring at the time. And there were these rapes occurring, but it was a manipulation of like who had done it, whether it was common criminals, whether it was actually someone who was violent or whatever. And of course, it inflamed people because people always like to believe that the other is a barbarous savage who is enjoying at their expense, who engages in moral excesses that are far beyond anything that, the good moral Israeli is allowed to engage in, even though all we have seen is vast systemic torture against Palestinians, sexual abuse for decades.
Which there is significantly more well-documented evidence for by not only Palestinian advocacy groups like Adamir, but also independent outside investigations from the United Nations that have concluded that there is like verifiable evidence for mass sexual assault under detention at checkpoints in the West Bank and on numerous occasions throughout this like apartheid structure that they've designed. Sexual violence is systematized by the Israeli military, the Israeli occupying force.
And I mean the other part is like the just general. I mean, there's the what's it called? More Than a Human Can Bear or something. The UN report about it, the recent one that just discusses like Israel's sexual violence against women. Gender-based violence is actually the overarching thing of the report.
Yeah.
But generally also like the obsessive parading around in Palestinian women's underwear. All of this stuff is all part of like a, Fanon spoke about a psychosexual madness in the context of Algeria, 40, 50 years before. And again, like drawing back on this similarity, what they were fighting against was the same thing, this like mad colonial thing, this mad colonial mindset that kind of justified anything against the indigenous people by portraying them as barbarous savages, And I think that for me, like in that context, it is very difficult to hear someone go, because this is the trick. It's, you never to have a serious discussion about what Israel actually does. It is to go, you denied this, so you are bad. You support terrorism, so you are bad. It is an appeal to emotion, which is funny because always it is claimed, well, the Palestinians appeal to emotion by showing you they're dead or showing you these things, when in reality, it's just, this is the horror of being Palestinian. Yeah. But also, and when this is just a direct appeal to, you are going to be scared of Muslims and you are going to think that they do worse things because they are Muslim, that they are sexually bad and different. And I think that, for me, that was a very interesting point. And I mean, I'd say that one of the hardest points to have a takeaway from was the bit where you discussed sort of Mizrahi Jewish people. Because first of all, you said pretty much everything I would say, but also I don't really understand what the point of what Ethan was saying was, because he would not heed the fact of, hey, it's not right to compare these two things. That Israel.
That was what I thought was really indecent. The double Nakba, which I say is similar to the double genocide theory that like a lot of Holocaust revisionist historians try to engage in. That is roundly criticized by other academics. However, it's kind of making a return now in liberal society. But I'm not going to get into that. But the double Nakba concept is one that I think was one of the most disingenuous points that he presented, and he did so by also misrepresenting Avi Shleim's perspective on it to try to hyper focus on literally one aspect of his own personal experience as an Iraqi Jew, or even like his academic work in terms of like what kind of violence Iraqi Jews were subjected to in an effort to make this really damaging comparison. I was more frustrated with the comparison. I never have denied that there have been anti-Semitic incidents that have taken place in numerous countries as a byproduct of pan-Arabic nationalism and the response and the reaction that these Arab countries had towards these different Arab countries, by the way, not Palestinians, once again, had towards their own Jewish populations in the aftermath of the Nakba. But yeah, there was a point where he said, sorry, I keep cutting you off, but there was a point where he basically said that, Arabs forced Arab Jews to become Zionist, which I thought was interesting. Is an interesting statement because that I think is basically like using Avi Shleim to say that. I feel like is so strange because it directly contradicts his main point. I feel like Avi Shleim's main point is the exact opposite of that. The fucking Arabs, to be precise. That's what he said.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I've never thought about it of the perspective of double genocide because, like, yeah, I mean, there was some, a lot of German people were removed from Europe. and a lot of them died, but they were people who'd gone in. And it in no way is in comparison or comparable or diminishes in any way the suffering of, Jewish people under the Nazis and European anti-Semitism generally. But like, just I mean, exactly what you're saying. There was also just this key point of what Britain did in the Middle East, made promises that they did not uphold. They literally promised Palestinians independence in the McMahon Hussein correspondence. They did categorically. They promised this to the vast majority of people within the region, except for really Syria, because they had a problem with the French in terms of giving it to the French, I believe. But anyway, they promised all this independence, then they denied it, so there's already animosity growing. They set up all of these colonial regimes there that were not really that popular, as once Britain began to wane in terms of its power after the Second World War, they all began to collapse, even ones like, the Egyptian, the Egyptian, like, monarchy and such. And is it really surprising that people began to feel animosity that was linked to, say, blaming the British, blaming Israel, the Jewish state, who could not exist without the support of the British? Because there was also a lot of people from around the region, like the Izzadin al-Qassam, the guy that the Hamas's military wing is named after, was from Syria. He went to Palestine to fight against, I think he'd fought against the French before, but he went to Palestine to fight against British imperialism there. And to ignore that context, and this is always the thing, and it's the thing that like smarter people than Ethan have done, Samuel Huntington, Clash of Civilizations, all of these people, they act as if Islam is this dogmatic, unchanging religion that has existed the same way for 1400 years and is completely uninfluenced. Or they'll say, and I really hated the point about this is also another point, like the bigotry of low expectations that people give.
Oh yeah, that was crazy. When talking about I hate when people, I mean, I can't believe he said that. I assume that someone fed that talking point to him, because like it especially doesn't fit in this position, but it is an inherently white supremacist talking point as a counter when someone tries to describe the importance of material conditions in the development of historically undermined, marginalized communities, to say like, oh, you just like have low expectations of black people because you're saying that they're like dumb and stupid. It's a way to try to flip the script. It's a very disingenuous technique that right wingers use usually. So for him to also try to utilize that in the conversation when I was talking about how like the material conditions obviously play a major role in societal development in the poorest country on the planet that has consistently been victim to imperialist endeavors, and only as recently as right before October 7 had they finally had a moment to liberate themselves from like this Saudi blockade, this UAE blockade that the Western forces had actually supported and backed due to Chinese intervention in the region, creating a peace negotiation between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Like, of course they don't have a civil rights movement to become quote unquote woke, I guess. Like that, yeah, they have nothing. Like it's just so insane.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like, I found that particularly grating. I mean, for example, I pulled this up. It's from an essay called Homo Zion by a guy called Hussein Omar. It's very interesting. But he mentions how sodomy laws in Palestine, or anti-sodomy laws, were introduced by the British. They were repealed in Palestine in 1951 and not inside Israel proper until 1988. By the way, his argument is that basically the British imperial officials imported that directly over from the Raj in India, and they did this because they.
I have another thing to bring up here. Homosexuality was only decriminalized in the Ottoman Empire in the 18th century during the Tanzimat era, but before that, it wasn't criminalized at all. They also legally decriminalized it in the fucking 18th century. So when Palestine was under Ottoman rulership, it most likely had that same exact legal structure where it wasn't illegal to be gay to fucking begin with, which directly undermines the point that Westerners always try to make, talking about the barbarity of Islam, and as though it's like you mentioned, this unchanging, dogmatic, fundamentalist principle that they operated off of. Sorry, I always like to talk about how gay the Ottomans were.
I mean, it's the same. There's a very famous, I've not actually read this, but I know that we had one of our lecturers would speak about it. I think it's called Women with Beards and Women with Moustaches and Men Without Beards, or something to that effect. And it's basically about gender in Iran and how it really wasn't concept until around I think it was like the 18th or 19th century. It really started being a major thing, and how queer society really was over there at different points, and how there is this a changing thing. And also it's indicative of, hey, maybe don't talk about a religion that is so old, 1400 years old, and say, oh, it's dogmatic, it's unchanging, and this is why Arabs are the way they are, or people in the Middle East, because often it's just a euphemism just to being Arab, basically, Muslim, and just talking about Islam. But especially just in this context of like talking about someone from Yemen, you're completely correct. Like, it's not low expectations. It's, look what has been happening in Yemen. And also another big thing is like, I think if you're like trying to be a populist in a country who rails against Western imperialism, I am sure that there is a certain appeal of blaming societal degradation as well on Western ideals and saying, look, they always preach how they brought you gay rights and all of these things. And look how worse a country like Iraq becomes. No doubt that's appealing to people because of the experiences of people on the ground. In the same way that as society in the West degrades, people like anti-immigrant discourse because it's something to cling to and blame for the degradation here. And it's not like a low expectation to say that someone might believe that. It's saying, well, this is kind of sadly what society has come to. If you are a person down on your luck, you're going to want to believe that because it's easier than addressing perhaps the more complex thing of, there's just a broken society where no one is offering you anything.
I've just never heard someone with your complexion and your accent explain this concept so perfectly. So I'm a little bit taken aback by this. My bigotry, my soft bigotry of low expectations from a British white man came out a little bit. I'm sorry, but you're 100% correct. This is something that I constantly talk about. Like you can even point to the Iranian Revolution. Like the reason why fundamentalists in countries like this under Western imperialism are seen as the most emancipatory forces. It is the reason why Hamas also ran on an anti-corruption ticket and was able to win the elections that the American government, the CIA, actually presented to Palestine and Palestinians, specifically the Gaza Strip. The more Islamist the forces are, the more fundamentalist they are, the more they can present themselves as anti-West. And if the entire population is firmly committed to having an anti-Western position due to all of the violence they've experienced from Western imperialism, they end up going with these people. And yes, the U.S. aid interventions and NGOs, civil society organizations that prop up everywhere that are hyper focusing on some of the civil rights movements, whether it's for good reason, whether it's because they truly do want gay liberation or whatever in these countries, or whether it's a mechanism of intervention, doesn't matter. That is why there's so much hostility towards these sorts of things and towards these sorts of movements in these other countries, because it's so quickly utilized by, like you said, fundamentalist but populist forces as a remnant of Western imperialism. All this gay shit is something that the West is bringing here.
And so easy to blame for the degradation of society.
Yeah,
exactly. And I think this just links exactly back to the point of what you were kind of trying to say to Ethan, not even on the topic of like Yemen and stuff, also just on the context of what happened to Jewish people. Obviously, people's perception of Jewish people and their is going to be tied up with Western imperialism. When Western imperialism was like, we're going to establish a Jewish state, Lord Balfour said over and over again, I do not care about the wishes of the 700,000 Arabs who live there. The Jewish people who do not live there yet are more important. And people feel solidarity across this place, especially in, I think it was once called Bilad al-Shams, like the bigger, greater Syria, basically. People felt massive solidarity across this space. And they all just experienced colonization by like Europe. And also on the topic of me as a British man talking this way, it hardly surprises me. A lot of people who say this to me, and it just shows you how like, I don't know, I guess kind of what the prominent voices from Britain really are. People like Douglas Murray spewing the most hateful views imaginable. And also just like very just, wicked imperialism for decades,
Yeah. No, for sure. I was joking, obviously. I know
of course.
Your work is great, but it's just not many Corbyns out there, unfortunately.
No, of course. Of course.
Too many Piers Morgans, not many Corbyns out there.
We live in a very space that is not necessarily that diverse in a lot of places, especially the countryside. Places like where I grew up, it's not really a place where you grow up around people who are different to you. So your perception is largely just shaped by, you know, bigotry and all of these things, and also trying to cling to imperial nostalgia. Really, like a lot
Yeah.
of people here want the empire back.
Oh, for sure.
Like, put simply,
It's I think social conditioning also is something that I want to briefly tackle here. My commentary gets criticism sometimes from the likes of Bad Empanada and other people that I would consider to be a little bit further than myself in terms of being like well-established third worldists, as opposed to my commentary sometimes comes across as liberal for them, because I see my position living in the heart of empire as an American citizen as one that tries to get Americans to understand the plight of the global South. So my messaging on that front is, of course, always going to be conciliatory towards people that have actually even taken violent imperialist action against the global South, in terms of like veterans that have served in the American military, veterans that have even served in the IDF, the Israeli occupying force. And because I understand the importance of social conditioning and how their development has been shaped by that, and how normalized that kind of process is, as long as they recognize that their actions were wrong and they work to atone for said actions and demonstrate that they have demonstrated that they don't believe these things or try to justify it. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I wanted to, this channel called Soft Take actually did a video, Selective Outrage, the silent podcaster Ethan Klein. And I thought it was really good because it's very informative. I don't know how much time you have, by the way. Hold on, let me fix your...
I don't really mind. I am very grateful
we can maybe
for this
do
opportunity.
a dual react together if you would like.
Yeah, that'd be
video.
awesome.
Hold on, let me resize your camera here as well. Okay, and then we can engage in this together. Hold on, let me make it a little bit smaller as well. This is the problem with live production, you know. There's a little bit of silliness that takes place. But yeah, this is a video that I think was actually really remarkable, because I didn't know the full extent of like their commentary. I don't really pay too close attention to like the drama aspect of things whenever there's like stuff coming out from that camp. But I do care about like the things that they have said about Israel, and I wanted to watch this specifically because I feel like it is instructive and shows some inconsistencies with the way that Ethan has presented himself, as opposed to what he has done over the course of the past year during this genocide that he also recognizes is genocide. All right, so let's begin.
Hey guys, it's the Soft Take, or newly referred as a
dumb fucking moron.
Ethan Klein, once the reserved counterpart to Ethan. She was known for her awkward charm and subtle humor. In the early days of H3, she was the shy, friendly presence besides Ethan's loud personality. The things she would say were once lighthearted or grounded.
She left last time as an Israeli. She enters today as an American. Hila, how does it feel? Tell me everything.
I feel like now I can really ride it. You know, we got the flags and the balloons. Like, I feel like every old person on a mobility scooter, they always have this like personalized touch to it.
Absolutely.
And now we got ours.
Right.
To have shifted into someone who appears more vocal than thoughtful.
Adam McIntyre needs to just like disappear. Yeah, Sam Cedar, another one I'm ready to burn. I know, you already did most of the work.
And also someone who seems to donate money to a slop tuber who hosts a show called Ultimate Review that picks apart sexual allegations.
The Ultimate Rape Review, for those of you who didn't know.
What is the people were mentioning this, and I saw whatever that is. What is that? What, like, is this serious? Like,
I don't know either. I only found out because someone in my audience informed me, but they said that it's apparently like they tier list like rape allegations or something. I don't know. I mean, it's just like the utter well of depravity is endless, especially in the Western world, but especially in America. Holy fuck. But it's like his stream does that.
Do you think it's pretty interesting how sort of you, Frogan, are all picked out as, not just you two, obviously, there's people like Matt Lieb as well, are picked out as like the worst anti-Semitic terror sympathizers, when there is no pushback on someone, say, like, I don't know, Asmongold, who said that he was only 99% that the Holocaust happened, that largely like people spewing really serious anti-Semitic bigotry. Like things
or
like
his entire chat was spamming W Hitler when he was going over this hearing that happened in a town hall where someone was saying like the first books that the Nazis burned were trans medical research, and he chimed in to say, well, they burned those books because they were written in Jewish.
And I mean, on this topic, it's kind of interesting as well, exploring your ideology versus what a neo-Nazi's ideology is, which is someone who hates on the basis of claiming that, this person has a different identity to me and they're trying to ruin everything around me. They're trying to ruin and degrade society, which is nothing like what you say. And yet, rather than, confronting and saying, hey, there's a rise in this similar bigotry that once existed, it's just ignored in favor of using anti-Semitism allegations as a means to not talk about Palestine.
Yeah. Also, another thing that I was going to mention with respect to Asmongold is apparently he is calling for my banning as of today, and he is the largest political content creator on not only this platform, but I would say the largest right-wing political commentator online right now. And he's been calling for my banning because I said in my conversation with Ethan that I stand 10 toes down in solidarity with the actions the Houthis have taken exclusively on the blockade of the Red Sea as a mechanism of punishment against Israel that's committing a genocide, which is, I think, I don't know how you could have an issue with that. I guess you can. I know you don't have an issue with that. I mean, I know how Americans can have an issue with that, where they say, well, they're bad and they're scary.
Well, even the UK government would allow me to say that. So, I'm not. You can't speak positively. Obviously, NECAP are in trouble for what they said about Hamas and Hezbollah. Houthis are not a prescribed terrorist organization here, so people are always chanting Yemen, Yemen, turn another ship around. So, I think I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying, and thinking that you deserve a ban in comparison for Holocaust revisionism. Yeah, it's an interesting topic of discussion.
All right, let's continue.
So LOLCal Live, a podcast co-hosted by Keemstar, someone that previously made her life hell. But first, who is Hila actually? She's the co-host of a podcast with her husband who's turned arguing with everyone into a full-time sport while she contributes to the show by slowly rotating in her chair. She's the founder and CEO of Teddy Fresh, a streetwear brand with a questionable theme that appears to sometimes allegedly borrow designs. Teddy Fresh also has a good causes section on their site, proudly listing charities they claim to support, which is a great thing. I appreciate them for doing. However, let's just say that I found out that not everything on that list checks out, which I will get into later on in the video. She loves to draw, present her unique clothing style on social media, and she is also someone that gets particularly vocal when criticism of Israel arises.
Worst stuff, Matt. It's not like Israel's going to do a precision strike on Hassan. They don't fucking... but it is dangerous. It's a war zone.
Sure, it's a war zone.
They may.
But what?
He was in the running for anti-Semite of the year. They may.
Nah,
I don't think you guys understand Israel. It doesn't work like that.
They're not.
And this is where she gets quite a lot of backlash. It's not because she's from Israel or that she served in the IDF. Well, actually that could be a reason for some. It's mostly because of the dehumanizing language she uses for Palestinians and her relentless defense for Israel. Also, I just want to be clear, I don't want to make Hila responsible for Ethan's flip-outs, but you cannot be dismissed as a silent bystander while Ethan spreads false information. And when she does decide to chime in, it's either about Hasan, defending Israel, or defending their takes. Took one look at her and assumed that she's an undocumented migrant worker that can't speak English.
The fact that they all go with this narrative that it was his mom. It's just unbelievable.
But what about them talking about Hasan going to Gaza?
Was like, I'm thinking of going to Gaza.
Until I found out they don't have like a 5-star suite for me with private security waiting there.
I would have bet my goddamn house that he would never step foot in Gaza. It's insanely pathetic. Somebody please. Well, and it's the same thing. To bring it back to the song, just because, but
For the record, this conversation took place between me, Jeremy Scahill, and a bunch of other journalists where we were trying to actively petition the Egyptian government to open the Rafah border crossing so that Western journalists could actually enter the Gaza Strip uninterrupted without actual Israeli envoys as a part of like a Israeli security operation. Because at the time, during the ceasefire, the only journalists that were allowed into the Gaza Strip were allowed to be airlifted alongside the Israeli occupying force, and were only allowed to film one specific area where humanitarian aid was being delivered to from Jordan within the Gaza Strip. And also they were still subject to the military censors. And this is the reason why no real reporting, with the exception of course, the Palestinian journalists that bravely have been reporting on the conditions every single day, has come out of Gaza even during the ceasefire period.
And you can't forget the brave reporting of Douglas Murray doing propaganda for the Israeli state with the IOF. Oh God,
yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, on this topic as well, I know that people started kind of mockingly saying go to Gaza. That's actually just what the Israeli far right says to other Israelis who protest about it. They just tell them go to Gaza. It's like a threat to basically die. Yeah. And they would probably have targeted journalists.
Of course they would have. That was like, I mean, it never even happened because like obviously the Egyptian government did not allow this to take place regardless, because it's a vassal state for American empire. And also by way of that, a collaborator with Israel as well. So it just didn't take place. All right, let's continue.
It kind of is the same thing. Like, I was thinking about going to Gaza.
Yeah. I also wanted to give
Sorry, guys, I'm not going to this war zone unless they can...
So much to the point that they started fantasizing how his visit to Gaza could look like.
They managed to keep the hostages alive. You can go be in the tunnels, I'm sure. You'll be safe
he's a
there.
high-value hostage for Hamas. He's an American citizen.
Like, this is also one of the most insane takes because it basically goes along with the same trope that is always presented, that like Hamas are not logical human beings and simply see this as like, they're just like barbaric monsters who will immediately go, oh, American, let's go and fucking kidnap this American and hold him hostage. This is a high value hostage. Now, this is silly for a couple different reasons. One, why in the ever-loving fuck would the Trump administration ever demand my return? Someone like myself, like that's ridiculous. Why? Like I have no value in that regard for the American government, nor the Israeli envoys that are having these negotiations. Secondly, this doesn't make any sense because then they would be kidnapping the World Central Kitchen aid workers, for example. Those were Westerners, right, that were working alongside the Israeli government to deliver humanitarian aid into Gaza. Why did Hamas not kidnap them instantly? Well, they died because Israel killed them, obviously. But why did Hamas not instantly fucking kidnap them? Well, because they're not stupid. Like, they obviously understand the necessity for journalism. And like, I mean, even fucking ISIS has actually gotten interviewed by journalists, and I'm not even talking about Jelani or whatever. I'm talking like straight up when ISIS militants have talked to journalists in general.
I've also seen there's some very disgusting rhetoric. I was just looking up his name. His name is Vittorio Aragioni, who was like an Italian who was murdered in Gaza in 2011, and he was killed by Al-Qaeda, like an offshoot there. And people were like, he had like some tattoo that was like about liberation or something, and someone was saying on TikTok, they were like, this is what the Palestinians do to you even if you go. And it's just like that they're fanatical, maniacal monsters who do whatever they want to people,
No, absolutely. And of course, like that's the other irony of this is like ISIS and Al-Qaeda are in direct odds with Hamas and other Palestinian militancy in Gaza in general, as opposed to Israel, which has found themselves in allegiance with ISIS on multiple occasions in their actions in Syria. So, that's another thing. But of course, from a Westerner's perspective, they're all dirty, filthy, Muslimist, Islamist, fundamentalist Arabs who are barbaric rapists.
Mm-hmm. 100%.
They've kidnapped.
Yes, also, of course, ISIS has killed journalists as well, Chatter. I'm saying that even a fucking force that is insane, psychotic, a force of true terror, sheer terror, which had a colonialist ambition as a militant force with no care or consideration for the civilian population overall, was still able to do interviews with Western reporters. Anyway, let's keep going.
Arabs and Muslims before.
If he's actually just worried about the Israeli side, like seriously, they can take him to the tunnels and he'll be safe.
If he entered through Rafah, which is the Egyptian crossing, and just went into Gaza like that, I think there's probably a more likelihood that he'd be kidnapped by Hamas than precision striked by Israel.
Yeah.
And then pedal it all back.
Like, there's also the other side of this where Hamas is both, there's a militant formation for Hamas and also the political apparatus as well, and like a civil organization of Hamas. And no, they would not do that. That is insane. But, you know, I think a lot of people, like, this is a really hard subject to broach with like a Western audience because they don't have this understanding where they're like, no, they're irrational actors. Like, of course they're going to do that to you. Shut the fuck up. You're defending Hamas right now by saying what they would and wouldn't do, regardless of the fact that like this is never happened throughout history, I think.
And I mean, it's especially sorry.
No,
it's
go
especially
on.
It's especially interesting in the context of how many like senior-ish, I can't remember, Jimmy Carter literally said it was more sensible to negotiate with Hamas than Benjamin Netanyahu, that they were more reasonable than Benjamin Netanyahu. And yet, you know, he's saying here, well, they're more likely to kidnap you. I mean, you spoke to Hossam Shabbat, right?
Yeah. I'm going to bring it up in a second, right after this.
Killed.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna get to that in a moment. I watched this part of the video already.
It's literally just a silly joke.
We're just criticizing you.
It's literally just a silly joke.
It comes across like a fucking pager joke.
It comes across as a pager joke. Hasan.
You know what's really crazy about this, by the way? I mean, a big chunk of the quote-unquote debate that you watched was Ethan trying to draw out microaggressions from things that were not even like directionally appropriate, that he admitted weren't even like real acts of anti-Semitism, where he said it's a swastika sword, but it's not a swastika sword, and the usage of the swastika sword by iDubbbz was actually to trigger him and to you know to imply that it was a swastika or something like that. And he wanted to say that was problematic. Meanwhile, he's over here doing like go to Gaza. Oh, it's just a joke. Why are you being such a pussy about it? You know?
And also how aggressive it is to say I would like to go to Israel, that it's a space of coexistence, that it's actually they've got Arabs in government, you know, Arab bus drivers and stuff. To say that that's a space of multiculturalism, what's that? That's not a microaggression.
Yeah,
it's a macro.
Should go to Gaza. And if he doesn't, he should be severely judged by his audience for being a total fucking coward.
I mean, it's part of why I judge him. He doesn't know shit about that conflict. He's never been to Gaza, never been to Israel. He doesn't know shit about it.
No, he doesn't.
He does not. But
I saw a comment that said, yeah, Katy Perry officially knows more about space than Stephen Hawking because she's been to space and he didn't. So, you know, classic Douglas Murray take.
I mean, 100%. The man who talks about Iran freely has never been.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
Talks like with such authority. Oh my God. You would think he's been there like 5 times since October 7th already.
This small bit of premium content is just a tiny part of a larger pattern. Ila's reasoning is just as inconsistent. Let's try and understand Ila's logic here. Hasan can't understand the conflict because he hasn't been there, as if lived experience is the only way to grasp reality. If we were to even go with this logic, then why does she not know about what's going on with the Tesla stock and Elon Musk's actions despite living in the very country where it's all happening?
Tesla's getting creamed lately. Like
they're down like 40%.
Out of them and like bombing, they're firebombing their factory and shit.
What?
USA.
Like,
I'm a little like I don't know if I'm out of the loop, but did something specific happen that all of a sudden this is happening?
I mean, that's quite an integral part of the ongoing events in the United States and its political landscape, while selling anti-Elon shirts in her own shop. And by the way, if you're watching this and thinking, oh, how come all the soft take can do is bring up Hasan? And well, the answer to that is simple. I don't. They do. What am I supposed to talk about when almost all of their content is referring back to Hasan? I just follow the storyline they keep writing. But anyway.
It's really interesting how we just cannot criticize him.
And then
whatever we dare to say about him in a criticism manner, we are a threat. We are backing genocide. We're children killers. Myself, that's what they say about me. It's like, no, I'm just criticizing you. I'm allowed to criticize you. And
yeah, no, I think this is perfectly apt. Everyone is allowed to criticize me. It's just what you are spending your time on matters. I think we have a finite amount of time on this planet Earth, but also we have a finite amount of time with our platforms that we have. And if the overwhelming amount of commentary revolves around like allegations of anti-Semitism that are not warranted at all, or defense of Israel, then obviously I'm going to take issue with that criticism as well. And that's precisely the reason why a lot of people who are more knowledgeable on this issue, or at least have a different perspective on this issue, has seen these criticisms as simply deflection away from Israel's behavior and their lack of interest in actually holding Israel to task.
It's also like just sort of saying the word genocide. I think some people kind of viewed it as waving a magic wand. And I know there were a couple of people who did this who were very pro Kamala Harris and stuff. And they were like, we called it a genocide. And now look, you wouldn't vote for her. And look what Trump's done. He just reaped the rewards. I mean, like, obviously Trump stands for something worse, but he just reaped the rewards of what the Democratic Party allowed. When you say it's a genocide, you are not just talking about a lot of people being killed. You are talking about the extermination of a populace, basically.
Yeah.
And what did Israel do? It wiped away every single social institution, like institution of social reproduction in Gaza, academics, the people who could have taught younger children, schools, hospitals, water sanitation facilities, agricultural land, memory, history, culture. Everything that Gaza once was wiped away when Biden was there. And sure, it's accelerated under Trump, but it wasn't stopping under Biden. And if Israel really wants to achieve what it claims it does,
and there's new reporting that has come out since then from Israeli media that talks about how even the Israeli administration was legitimately shocked that the Biden administration had not actually demanded any real ceasefire whatsoever. Like, they were shocked at how gung-ho Biden was about continuing this bombing campaign, which we could all see obviously with our own two fucking eyes from the impact that it was having, where he kept saying like, oh, we're going to do this. We're telling Benjamin Netanyahu not to do that, but apparently behind closed doors, an entirely separate conversation was taking place, considering that Bibi would come out the next day and be like, yeah, fuck off, we're not doing that at all.
I mean, you've done this for a long time. There's no way that I can't really imagine that you thought in any capacity that this would have gone on for as long as it has. Like, this level of extermination, you thought that there would be a break pulled at some point, as much as I did. I did not think we would be sat here, 19 months later of live stream just the most obscene crimes imaginable, like regular extermination of human beings.
Yeah.
Just every day, 20, 30, 40 people dead. And it's becoming harder and harder to talk about because so much happens every single day with less and less on the ground reporters, because some of the most important voices against the genocide are gone, dead, murdered. And increasingly we see less and less, and we have no idea what's even really happening there anymore, like the levels that it has now reached. And, it's 15 months of this, and people act as if saying, well, there's a genocide waves it all away. It doesn't. Even if you think that there's a genocide, it's about talking about it and saying, hey, these really bad things are happening. And of course, anti-Semitism matters, but your feelings are incomparable to the feelings of Palestinians who live there, and also Palestinians who don't live there. People who live in Western countries now and got out of Gaza, maybe for whatever reason, to go study, to go live, to go do something else. And their families are there. The level of trauma that they experience, with it being at university last year, having to hear statements about how they're worried about the suffering in the Middle East, and looking at their treatment of a friend whose family was being killed in Gaza, and the university being unwilling to say, yeah, we are sorry for what is happening to your brother, and that we should be speaking out about what's happening there, the extermination of institutions over there, wiping away, but burning down universities and burning down their libraries because you can. And you want to talk about your feelings now, instead of the feelings of people who are experiencing something that is incomparable.
Your feelings as a consequence of your audience being at odds with your commentary on this issue, like the lack of interest that you have in focusing on the actual victims in the story, and consistently trying to turn around and talk about the victimhood that like Israelis must feel, or the victimhood that American Jews might feel because of this this dangerous conflation of Judaism and Zionism. Ironically enough, a conflation that Ethan himself makes with regular frequency. Because if he at any point turned around and said like Zionism is antithetical to Judaism, it is not Judaism at all. It is a propaganda technique adopted from early Zionists and has been implemented in every facet of social conditioning in the lives of American Jews, and it's a very dangerous conflation that we must get rid of. If he said that and then talked about the lived experiences of Western Jews, most people would not actually fucking critique him on this issue at all. I have routinely talked about this. I had Simone Zimmerman on alongside my friend Noah Colwin, who did the documentary called Israelism, specifically detailing the social conditioning that takes place for young American Jews living in the Western world, that creates this that creates this allegiance for the state of Israel through fear, through utilizing the intergenerational trauma of the Holocaust and pogroms that Jews have withstood, and how dangerous that conflation is, and how that turns people into outlets of propaganda individually. And you know, I think that is an important thing to address as well. Like I said, some people will say I'm a Jewish exceptionalism. I'm doing Jewish exceptionalism by even focusing on American Jews and the social conditioning that they go through, or the journeys that they go through in terms of going from being liberal Zionist to anti-Zionist. But like, I live in the fucking Western world. Of course I'm going to do that. It's important to recognize that is because it's also an issue that I also, you know, separately care about. As Ethan says, you can care about two things at once. And it's like, yeah, I do. I do care about those things. I do care about the dangers of rising anti-Semitism.
Of course. And I mean, also, by the way, sorry if I'm taking up too much time by constantly talking.
No, not
just
at
let me
all.
know.
No, I'm not letting you talk at all, ironically.
No, you are. Don't worry at all. But one of the things I wanted to mention is, even in this context, the first ever video I made about Ethan, Gila, Israel and stuff was actually when YouTube was still doing leftovers in 2023 or something. I remember it was a video that did quite well. It was on TikTok, and it was talking specifically about birthright. And it actually came a lot from their video where they talk about how they met and how Ethan refers to it as like a Jewish dating simulator, because one of my friends wrote a beautiful, really interesting dissertation about how basically birthright affects Jewish people's opinions. And one of the things she noted was that by virtue of going to Israel, a lot of them don't actually change their perspective about whether they think Israel is really good or really bad. But what a lot of people start to feel is a fear for the people that they meet there and form relationships with, and worry about their security, their safety, and all of these things. And it's always a thing for like Jewish people who have family there. They worry about their safety without ever considering like, and obviously because of the way that people are conditioned, they don't want to consider, well, actually, this is by virtue of the position of having an open frontier of settlement where you are consistently in other people's land. Like, people always bring out, oh, this happened on October the 6th. I think one of the biggest things that doesn't get mentioned that I brought up today is Israel used an attack helicopter in Jenin for the first time since 2002 in July of 2023. I remember covering it on TikTok and doing like my first ever lives and being like, yeah, this is seriously looks like something major might happen here. And then obviously nothing like, well, I mean, it was major in of itself, like what Israel did, but nothing like October the 7th scale came out of it. But it just shows you, when Israel has this open frontier of settlement, what it is fighting to defend is not for the safety of the Jewish people. It is not even really for the safety of the concept of a Jewish state. What they are fighting for is to maintain an apartheid regime and to maintain settlement of Palestinian land and kicking the can down the road until you reach a final point where there is no viable Palestinian state. And Western governments help this by constantly talking about the two-state solution, and you push towards this point, and then eventually they'll just say, well, they can't have a state. There's nothing left of their land. There's Jewish people everywhere, you know?
Yeah. No, it's utilizing the two-state solution in an effort to consistently advance the settlement project and create Bantustans and partition out the remainder of occupied Palestinian territory that that Israel is illegally occupying, that is what the quote unquote two-state solution looks like. And that's precisely the reason why I always tell people, regardless of whether they're pro-Palestine or pro-Israel, that it is a de facto one state right now. This is precisely what a one state looks like as long as there is an Israeli apartheid, an Israeli occupation, which is why I advocate to abolish the apartheid and abolish the occupation and create a real one state where citizens have equal rights and equal votes and equal say. My advocacy around this from Ethan's perspective in the early conversation that we had, we didn't get to talk about that this time around, was basically, no, that would be a genocide of all Jews because the Palestinians would come in and just like genocide all the Jews and kill all the Jews if there was a one state. That in and of itself is ethno-religious nonsense. Like that is fascism.
Mm-hmm. That would be much more like the concept of the bigotry of low expectations, that Palestinians are unable to look after themselves, that Palestinians are unable to behave in a way. I saw a video of Douglas Murray saying this. He said, give the Palestinians one school and see if they can teach their kids not to kill Jewish people. It's just obscene, you know. Palestinians don't feel that way.
Palestinians, they have a higher literacy rate than the Israeli society. What the fuck is that?
Mm-hmm,
like
100%, 100%.
It's so racist. All right, let's continue.
Still want good stuff to happen for Palestine. Like I can do both.
It was really hard for me to find those moments where she shows that she wants good things to happen for Palestine. The ones I found are in this video. But let's talk about the labels Hila deals with. And could it be that they come from Hila's patterns on the H3 podcast? Patterns of deflecting, dismissing, and downplaying Israel's actions.
It's so complicated.
Yeah.
From their perspective, it's like these guys.
But they go specifically to people who they know are terrorists, and they have a history of that stuff, and they know they have guns.
And the thoughtful criticisms Hila shares about her self-declared enemies looks something like this.
What is this frame, bro? Why are you just like in the corner?
It's absolutely
Frame
terrible.
Your shit up, man. He changed his background.
I hate
AB
it.
would love that. Although,
hey, Hasan, I hate
like
your new background.
Frankly. Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I think his room looks better with
it
like
makes
Hamas.
no sense.
Or hear about Matt Lieb.
It's disgraceful to participate in a snark page. It is. And
I think it's
Ethan
disgraceful as
is allowed to point it out.
And
yeah, this is another, this is drama related a little bit and not entirely Israel-Palestine related, but, I'll entertain it for this moment. But getting upset at other content creators participating in a snark subreddit is so funny when they openly operate a snark subreddit. And they do it for not just like, they don't do it just for like advancing drama and making content out of it, like in a serial harassment, in the serial harassment campaigns that they contribute to, but they also do it on the backdrop of a genocide, which is like their only commentary surrounding Israel's genocide of Palestinians. Is just like doing drama and doing snark against pro-Palestinian advocates. It's really, really shockingly depraved. 100%,
100%. Yeah, just making it all about, even during the debate, having to hear about like your head being small. Like, who cares? I swear it's something also that you joke about quite a lot. You know, just having to hear about that, like in between, it's like there were certain parts as well that I just had to skip because I was like, there's not much to analyze here. It's just Ethan sort of being mean and just for the sake of it and like mocking the way that you speak. And it's just like, what is this? This is just feeding into people who just hate you anyway. And I guess feeds into what I said about it. People had already decided what their mind was. I'm sure that there are some people who actually did change their opinion because of it, but there are tens of thousands of people who went in and they would always say that Ethan had, destroyed you and that he really got you on this one, that he has like an epic clip of it. And it's just like, I don't know. I don't know. It's very hard to see.
The epic clips that have come out so far from their side have been Ethan repeating that he wouldn't like it if Anne Frank resisted against the Nazi occupation. And also, what's the other one? The Arab anti-Semitism caused Arab Jews to become Zionists. Those are the two major points that they've arrived at, I think. Yeah, Ethan, mocking your speech is wild. I will not expand on it. Yeah, that stuff was like really childish. I didn't really care about that. I don't know why he thought that made him look good. I suspected he was trying to bait me, as I've said, to like say something against him that he could then package up as like ableism, to say like, oh, you're being ableist, I have Tourette's or something. I didn't really entertain that at all, because I feel like it's bad. It's a bad optics in general. Let's continue.
Also,
And if that's too much for you, maybe get off the internet.
right,
And
or at least get off.
maybe don't work for a reputable company like Red and Link. You don't deserve to work there.
Or this
Instalock, you're going to get fired. One speed, always. People who defend Israel, immediately. Accusations of anti-Semitism followed by, you need to lose your job right now. That's it. Yeah.
very reasonable criticism of Sam Cedar.
Sam Cedar, another one I'm ready to burn.
By the way, Sam Cedar agrees with me. I saw a clip of him the other day being like, saying
Well,
that he's too state.
I don't know.
Too state.
I
I
don't
was
know
like,
if he agrees with you because he also like protects Hassan at all costs.
She was right. He was wrong. She wasn't wrong. It's just, you know.
You're ugly and you're dumb and you're not funny.
Hila and Ethan have repeatedly stated that they oppose Netanyahu and his government.
So here's what I'll say about Israel. Listen, this isn't the first time I've said it, and I'll say it and many more times. The cabinet is run by genocidal maniacs. They're led by Netanyahu, who should resign in disgrace and go to prison for being a war criminal. He's made a coalition of the most radically conservative freaks that don't represent, by the way, the majority of Israelis.
They voted against Netanyahu.
You mentioned that we lived in Israel and we voted against Bibi. Even Ethan, we both voted.
Yeah, I was in, I think, 2 elections, and both time I voted against him.
So what do you guys want from us?
And here is them showing empathy for Palestine and being pro two-state solution.
The problem is the extremes on both sides. The Orthodox Jewish people
And the
cause
extreme
trouble,
yeah.
and the terrorists.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
who do all the terror attacks on the other side.
You know what's really interesting about this? Ta-Nehisi Coates actually had a conversation with Ezra Klein on this exact same perspective, where Ezra basically said, "Oh, why didn't you actually talk to any why didn't you in The Message, his latest book, why didn't you actually cover the plight of Israeli society? Why did you not spend any time on the extremism of Hamas terrorists and things of that nature?" And Ta-Nehisi Coates actually had a really good take on this, where he was like, notice how you said extremist Orthodox Jews or extremist settlers, but then as soon as you talked about the Palestinian side, Palestinian militancy, Palestinian resistance, you said terrorists, like Hamas terrorists. That double standard, even that packaging in this conversation is a part of the invisible ways in which a lot of people in polite society and liberal society view this conflict in an asymmetrical way, except in the exact opposite asymmetry that they are supposed to be viewing the conflict from. Because the reality of the matter is the asymmetry actually is supposed to offer more moral credibility to the side that is resisting against the apartheid state, not the side that is escalating some of the most violent aspects of said apartheid state.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, on this topic as well, it's interesting to say ultra-Orthodox when, of course, a lot of these people do practice Judaism in a very religious people, but Meir Kahane was literally considered a terrorist by the State Department. You know, it's a fair term to use about him if you're using it in the context of saying, well, this Palestinian group is. But we always hear about, how Hamas said something to do with trees and rocks, something to that effect in their original charter.
A Jew behind a tree or something. Yeah.
In the context of Kahane, I always bring it up. The guy literally said that he thought that every Palestinian should be expelled and the ones that wouldn't would have their throats slit. And the more terrifying part is that it seems that his rhetoric is now prevalent all across Israeli society, which is our closest ally, which is held up as the moral defender of Western civilization. And he really is reigning supreme. Israel brought in a ton of laws that he tried to bring in. And the things that he suggested for Israel, other Jewish people, another member of the Knesset compared them to the Nuremberg laws, one by one, every single thing he suggested, and said that these are actually very, very, very similar to what Hitler wanted to do to Jewish people. Kahane was, so incredibly racist, and he was, I don't know, we don't really talk about that as an extremity or an illness within the faith of Judaism. But when people are more than happy to talk about Hamas as some symptomatic death cult in, reputable newspapers.
Yeah. Also, Pee Wee Bay says, we're settlers on native land. How many of us would be sympathetic to violent resistance by any native groups? Your bias is based on your position in the situation, which is really funny because I'm Turkish and I advocate for Kurdish liberation. So I'm actually much closer to the subject matter than you would think in terms of like creating a parallel here. And not only that, but also as an American, the reason why they call me a fucking terror supporter is because I'm actively contextualizing how these militant resistance groups are formed in the region as a direct consequence of American imperialism. And one of my most famous quotes was when I said America deserved 9/11. So obviously, that is very silly of you to point to, given my background, both as a as a Turkish person and also an American citizen as well. So yeah, cool though. I get it.
They cause the trouble. Yeah. But I feel like if you ask most people, especially my age, they'll be like, just do whatever it takes. Just
they don't
do
care.
It. Split it. Do the two-state solution. Do whatever it takes.
And by the way, I find it quite fascinating to see how their public statements and attitude has shifted over time.
A lot of drug problems.
The regular people there are, I mean, everyone feels bad for them, even on, the Jewish side. Oh, yeah. And they're just...
What can you do?
They're just stuck there.
On the surface, they seem to present themselves as neutral voices, people who acknowledge the suffering on both sides, distancing themselves from the more extreme Zionist rhetoric.
Yeah, Israel is bombing the fuck out of Gaza right now, which is a horrible humanitarian tragedy that's happening.
But if that's the case, why do so many see them as pro-Israel, anti-Palestine, or even Zionist apologists? They themselves cannot grasp as to why. Could it be because of Ethan and Ela saying things like they want to travel to Israel to show how beautiful the country is and how diverse its people are, all in the midst of a genocide?
We're planning to go to Israel in June with my parents and all the kids. It's going to be such a great trip. And I'm actually really excited to go there. I want to show you guys.
You haven't been there in so long.
What I want to do is show you guys how I see Israel, because you don't see that when you listen to Hasan and you hear all these fucking mega lefties talking about it like it's some super racist, like crazy, like Jim Crow style of society.
And after making jokes about Hasan not going to Gaza for months on end, they kind of seem they want to be a bigger part of their own joke as well.
Currently, we're waiting for like a peace deal or something to go into effect.
Yeah, we put the visit off while the war is
because we want to come with the kids, and
I don't want them to have to deal with sirens and seeing all that hearing all that shit,
Or is it Ela's constant IOF apologies instead of finding one critical word about her own service or the IOF in general?
And there's other countries that have mandatory service armies.
Very common.
You're just being racist if you have a problem with the whole country.
Including,
that's
by
racist.
Turkey has mandatory military service.
Yeah, and my parents were not the rich kind that will pay to get me out. But even if they were, they would not agree to that because they think it's important to serve.
Like, even if she hadn't said the second part, this would be more defensible to their audience if they're even remotely tuned into this frequency of being pro-Palestine, where they'd be like, what do you, okay. But like she packaged it up with like, no, mandatory service is also good because like it's an honor to simply serve. Like making that statement is so crazy. Ethan tried to come at me with a similar perspective when we were having this conversation where he's like, well, you pay taxes in America. And it's like, yeah, that's precisely the reason why I do talk about Israel virtually every fucking day, because I see my own moral culpability. I see the violence that my tax dollars contribute to, which is why I want others to also wake the fuck up and try to put an end to this, try to put a stop to this violence, saying, oh, well, if you didn't serve, you would also, you'd be in jail, right? Or if you didn't pay your taxes, you'd be in jail, as though this is a similar comparison, especially considering that, like, I have no say. I try to have more say in where the taxes get allocated to, but there's still plenty of good things that those taxes actually go towards, like building roads and funding education.
It's also a pretty interesting take in terms of, I mean, I don't know what Turkish military service consists of. What does it consist of? What do you actually do if you do it?
Oh, no, there is definitely, I mean, depending on where you are positioned, like there is definitely, you could potentially, someone with a college education, most likely not, but if you don't have a college education, like you will potentially go to the South where you could find yourself doing harm to like Kurdish villages or fighting against like PKK.
That's exactly what I mean. Why, Mr. Middle East understander, why would you say that you should have done that?
Yeah.
It's not like a good or awesome thing to be doing, just going and like serving to oppress Kurdish people,
Yeah,
It's
I don't
not- it's not like
I don't want to
some-
go do war crimes in fucking Syria, dude. What the hell? Like,
Exactly. Like I mean, I thought about that as soon as it was brought up. I was like, why on earth would you ever say, if you have like even a basic knowledge of the Middle East, that it's a good idea to join the Turkish military?
yeah.
It's just
Which is
ridiculous.
ironic because I when I was younger I wanted to do it because I thought like, oh, it'll be fun to do for like the limited service that you do when you have a college education and also have worked in a foreign nation for an extended period of time. There's like limitations to how long you can serve. Like you get breaks basically. And thank God I didn't do that, to be fair. Holy shit.
Like everybody else in the country. I mean, it's a very selfish move to decide, okay, I'm not going to do it, but everybody else
understand,
will.
like-
I mean, when you're
Selfish.
growing up with constant terror attacks, the army is a necessity.
Yeah. It's just
For
a
one
statement back.
person to decide, I'm not going to do it, is a very selfish decision because
ground-
meanwhile you're not doing it, everybody else is doing it and putting their life on hold. Very important years of your personal development, you're putting it on hold to go do this, and it helps nothing with your career afterwards. You finish it, then you start.
First of all, you would also be putting your life on hold because you'd go to jail for refusing mandatory service. And secondly, if it's selfish to not serve in the military because everyone else is putting their life on hold, then how selfish is it to go along with mandatory service and contribute to the oppression and killing of Palestinian civilians? Ela
Yeah.
framing the issue that it's simply about mandatory military service is ignoring the unique and highly controversial role of the Israeli military in enforcing occupation. While other nations have mandatory military service, most do not involve an ongoing military occupation of another population. Comparing Israel's conscription to countries that also have conscription, such as Switzerland or South Korea, is ignoring a massive difference. And Laban
Also, I'm not entirely certain on this because like I didn't even know Ethan had Israeli citizenship until recently. Even though I had a podcast with him and people got mad at me for not knowing that, but I just always thought he was like a guy that is that grew up in California. Apparently he dodged the Israeli military, so I don't know what that's about. When she's like, yeah, it's really selfish.
criticism towards the IOF as racist against the whole country is attempting to shut down the conversation. It's just as Ela said.
It's like, if this is your argument, we're never going to be able to talk.
Well, so far in these few clips alone, you mirrored Israeli government rhetoric by portraying refusal to serve as betrayal rather than moral stance, and you framed criticism for joining mandatory service as racism, despite the IOF's well-documented war crimes. But that's not everything. Let's keep going. Ela seems to deny Israel to children.
People are saying Israel does that on the daily, the idea
I
does
don't.
that on the
That's
daily.
not what I'm talking about. See, that's what you're doing. You're excusing people being burned alive and kids being murdered. You're saying Israel does that on the daily. Now, I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that. So are you
I'm
in?
denying that.
So are you in
Israel does
favor of an Iraqi terrorist?
Here's my response to that just by showing the following. An article from 2022 states 2022 to become the deadliest year for Palestinian children in the West Bank in over 15 years. An article from 2023 marks the deadliest year on record for children in the occupied West Bank. This article is about 1 month before.
Yeah, Euromed Human Rights Monitor literally released their report on this as well on October 6, 2023, by the way. Like,
And I mean, even on this topic, like growing repression, increasing assaults on the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and increasing government presence of saying people, we want to destroy it. All of these things, Palestinian life has been getting harder and harder with the sole explicit goal of removing more and more Palestinians. In fact, in the West Bank, it's much more about concentrating them into a really small amount of areas, like a few Palestinian townships where they're all surrounded by, as Bantustans, as you put it earlier, like concentrating them into smaller and smaller Bantustans, not giving them any right to live and just making them leave, destroying Palestinian ways of life, modes of existence. So there's no two-state. And, it's not really about killing and death in many ways. It's just ridiculous.
For the October 7th attacks. Now, it is worth quickly disclosing that the next few articles I'm about to show accord after she said that she denies this. But Ela never seemed to have changed her mind about this, at least not publicly. An article from 2023, after the 7th of October, more than 3,195 children in 3 weeks. In 2024, the Gaza Strip was recognized as the deadliest place on earth to be a child. And finally, since the breakdown of the ceasefire on the 18th of March 2025, the Gaza Strip has left at least 322 children and 609 injured, constituting a daily average of around 100 children or maimed over the past 10 days, according to an article by UNICEF.
Kids being murdered. You're saying Israel does that on the daily. I'm not denying that. So are you...
This kind of disbelief in what Israel is capable of seems to have rubbed off on her husband, Ethan, who portrays the country in surprisingly positive light.
People are so weird about Israel media because, like, you'll see people all the time being like, even according to Israel media, they said this happened. But then at the same time, it's like, oh, she reads Israel media, so she's obviously brainwashed in the Zionist.
Yeah, because Israeli media literally has the same exact, like, permissible boundaries of speech. Actually, it's worse than America in some respects, where you do have the liberal Zionist takes, or even sometimes anti-Zionist takes from like 972 magazine or Haaretz, all the way down to, you know, Kahanist screeds coming from right-wing newspapers. So yes, you can get both of those ideologies represented. But having said that, saying Israel's a free society outside of the apartheid structure, as a matter of fact, is even silly, considering the reality that there is a military censor. There's a military censor that stops all newspapers and all media publications from revealing certain things in Israeli press.
I mean, as well, also, yeah, exactly. Even on plus 972, like the Where's Daddy report it's very interesting reporting, but I still think that there are parts of that about the accuracy, the skill of like how sort of accurate it is at like targeting people. I don't believe it. I do not believe it at all. I think some of the numbers are massaged in that kind of stuff because, you know, it has worse press freedom than even Qatar by quite a considerable amount now. It's according to Reporters Sans Frontières. It's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous.
Also, it can be seen as I think like that report is damning in and of itself for sure. It's like shocking to Americans if they ever encounter it. I've covered it, but also it creates the reason why it would pass the Israeli censors, in my opinion, is because it creates a plausible deniability structure for the acts that the Israeli occupying forces engaging in Gaza by attributing it to an AI targeting system rather than like a deliberate killing field that they've created. So it's not even individual hands that are touching the bombs. It's actually being guided and directed. Like the targeting systems are being populated with AI.
Even like a lot of how denial operates from some of the more skilled like some of the more competent deniers of what Israel does. It's always like, oh, well, it's just, you know, a couple of people with these mad statements. You know, you can't pull up Haaretz and say, oh, look at what this one person did, or this was an individual war crime, as opposed to ever confronting like this is a systemic pattern that comes from a whole dehumanizing rhetoric that was always in the structure of Zionism and was always going to head to the end point of you cannot have two competing national identities existing within a space. If settlers come and say we're going to build a Jewish state, the prerequisite will always be that there is not a Palestinian state there and not a Palestinian mode of existence. It's always what settler colonies are like.
Yeah.
Yes, it's like Israel is a free society with free press. It has the whole gambit.
It definitely does not have a free press. I'm glad that I addressed it, but it 100% does not have a free press. I wouldn't even say like America has a full-blown free press due to the self-censoring that people engage in, and we've seen that we've seen that in broad daylight with New York Times reporting on Israel, or BBC's reporting in your country on Israel, especially. These are the two most significant papers that have basically dropped the ball in spectacular fashion at a time when I think it's critical that we beef up trust in mainstream institutions, like mainstream press in general. And they've done that at the behest of Israel 100%. And even then, I think the Israeli press is, due to the military censor, as I mentioned, far less free than even Western press.
Yeah, no idea what Iran actually targeted when they struck Israel. No idea where Israel actually has any military institutions. There's an article talking about what Hezbollah targeted in Israel from years ago, and the guy says, I cannot say or confirm anything that's near me or what's near me because it's not legal. I'll be removed from the country and arrested.
Yeah.
It is not a free country. I mean, it's comical to say this as, someone who said he needed to debate IDubbbs because IDubbbs knows nothing of Palestine.
Yeah. But one thing I will also maintain, and this is something I've talked about quite a bit, is that ironically, I routinely talk about how like Haaretz will outflank New York Times and the BBC or even CNN reporting on a lot of stuff because the military censors do not see a need to suppress certain truths from the Israeli public, to shelter certain truths from the Israeli public, because there isn't like that same social conditioning that you need to engage with for the broader Israeli public that has a lot of appetite for this death and destruction, which is precisely the reason why, like, in order to maintain the veneer of free press, like, you will still see extremely critical pieces of reporting from the likes of Haaretz on the IDF, for example, in the way that they operate, in a way that you actually never see from the New York Times, or oftentimes when the New York Times does get to it, it's months later and it's buried under paragraphs and paragraphs of describing the gruesome nature of Hamas, because the New York Times and the BBC understand that if you were to showcase the full depravity of Israel's military actions in this genocide, and I jokingly say this, but like, you'd have the Barbaras and Deborahs over the age of 50 talking about how they would join Hamas if they could. It would turn into like an IRA style situation with America, where they were sending material support to the IRA, directly sending guns to the IRA if they truly understood the horrifying things that are happening. And in spite of that, there's still a 53% unfavorability rating in the United States of America against the state of Israel at this point.
That's why we couldn't see a documentary about, a kid's perspective on what's happened in Gaza, like the documentary that was removed. I'm sure you heard about that.
That
it was
removed
so crazy. His dad was allegedly the deputy minister of agriculture in the Hamas government, and it was needed to be that people weren't allowed to see it. But truthfully, it's just giving a child's perspective on what's happening in Gaza and showing how people's lives are. And a few people spoke a certain way, and who cares? Like, that is people in Gaza speaking a certain way, and it's because I think people would see that actually, truthfully, a lot of the reasons that those people spoke like that was because of their experience, as opposed to being related to, Islamic backwardness and such of these things. And that's why I guess the Louis Theroux thing is much more okay, because it's showing the extremity of Israeli society. Not to admonish it, I thought it was a brilliant documentary, but still, I don't know. It's just very interesting.
Yeah.
Opinions in the press.
Just like America does, you know what I mean?
Israel seems to have a wide range of media sources. Calling it free press is again comfortably painting Israel in a very nice picture.
I'm gonna grab my food real quick.
When you are aware that pressures from the government, military censorship, and violence against journalists are a recurring theme, and then you have Ethan calling Israel a free society here, what could it look like when Ethan, whose wife served in the IOF, comfortably states the opposite of what is widely evident? Freedom of speech, assembly, and the right to protest are enshrined in Israeli law, but are they equally distributed? Reporters Without Borders states Israeli journalists identified as Arab face more intimidation while working. Since the start of the war in Gaza, the authorities have intensified repression against these journalists, as well as against foreign and Israeli journalists who deviate from the government line in their coverage of the war. Organized crime networks try to restrict coverage of their criminal activities, and in the ultra-Orthodox media, women are almost completely excluded. Time. In the deadliest period for journalists in modern history, at least 131 media workers have been killed in the Gaza Strip since the start of Israel's retaliation for the Hamas attacks of October 7, 2023. International media groups are alarmed by Israel's naming 6 Al Jazeera journalists as terrorists. Article 19. Since Israel's war on Gaza began in October 2023, the devastating impact on journalists has been clear. They have been killed in unprecedented numbers, threatened, and harassed. Protecting press freedom remains critical to documenting human rights violations, conveying the voices of Palestinians in both the West Bank and Gaza, and enabling accurate reporting. The Guardian. Jeremy Bowen, the BBC international editor, has accused the Israeli government of blocking journalists from Gaza because of scenes they don't want us to see. Despite all of this, Ethan and Ela continue to paint Israel as a bastion of free expression, and then Ela continues to reinforce a sanitized image of Israel, brushing off any real concerns about press freedom and safety.
I can't get any security assurances against Israel, obviously.
Well, bro, it's not like
Israel that is worried.
Look,
about
it's not like Israel's going to do a precision strike on Hassan. They don't.
Yeah,
but it is dangerous. It's a war zone. Like, I agree, it's dangerous.
Sure,
They
it's
may.
a war zone.
They may.
But what?
He was in the running for anti-Semite of the year. They may.
Nah, it's
I
a
don't think you
different
guys
world.
understand
Yeah, it's a
Israel. It
different
doesn't
world.
work like that.
They're
there.
not.
Just 3 days after the stream, American Al Jazeera journalist Hussam Shabat and Palestine Today journalist Mohammed Mansour were killed by the IOF.
I don't think you guys understand Israel. It doesn't work like that.
As if the country is incapable of such actions, even though reports from groups like Reporters Without Borders, Human Rights Watch, and Amnesty International show otherwise. Here are some more cases that really prove that Ela knows what she's talking about. In 2003, American student and peace activist Rachel Corrie attempted to stop the demolition of a Palestinian home by standing in front of an Israeli bulldozer. Despite her non-violent protest, she was tragically killed when the bulldozer ran her over.
I don't think you guys understand Israel. It doesn't work like that.
And in response, there were, or even still, Facebook posts.
Yeah, I understand Israel is exactly like that, especially because, as you pointed out, I was in direct correspondence with Hossam up until Israel assassinated him. So that's another like insane thing that I never got to tackle when talking to Ethan about how like Israel doesn't do that. Israel doesn't target journalists, and Israel has targeted TikTokers. Like Israel has killed TikTokers in my community, like Meadow, and journalists that I was corresponding with as well, while simultaneously calling them Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad operatives.
Yeah, I mean, Hossam was apparently some kind of sniping militant who's just, communicating with people, also alongside reporting, and just went through so much and, was really a hero, and yet it was degraded in such a way. But, I mean, it's just atrocious now. But I guess that's kind of the problem with the debate, because how can you really bring up all of this stuff? Because Ethan has done so much, and he would have just said, no, I didn't say that. I didn't do that. That's not what I did. You're misrepresenting me. Or, oh, yeah, I don't actually think that, when, you've said these things, and you must be able to admit that this is not anti-Semitism,
Yeah.
And I mean, even this topic I also find very interesting, the Rachel Corrie stuff. Because, I mean, I've spoken about this before, but I don't know if you've ever noticed this. It's kind of problematic in a sense of, not to undermine what people do, but in the sense of that people are always much more fussed when someone with a different passport, when someone with who was doing peaceful activism is killed, as opposed, and we kind of know all their names, but we often do not know the names of, the Palestinians who were killed doing the exact same thing. The people who are killed at weekly demonstrations at certain villages in the West Bank who are just shot by Israelis, the hundreds of people killed during the Great March of Return, maimed, all of these things, we don't know their names. And it's kind of like a sad thing of, not to admonish and not to say people shouldn't go and do these wonderful things and stand with the Palestinians, but it's just this unfortunate thing of how media works, that we sadly only hear when it's someone who doesn't have a Palestinian citizenship, basically.
Yeah, World Central Kitchen workers as opposed to the hundreds of humanitarian aid workers that Israel has killed. But I mean, that is like the entire, I described to my audience the entire purpose of like Doctors Without Borders and organizations such as this one is like trying to use Western chauvinism as a shield, basically. And it's the same reason why I also will always support anti-Zionist activists inside of Israel, or even like peace activists that go and Israeli peace activists that go and like defend the Palestinians during olive harvest season from by putting their bodies in front of the Israeli occupying force, utilizing the ethno-religious supremacist ideology that is guiding this entire movement, that makes it so that they are not targets of the military. Like the Jewish Israelis are not targets of the military because of this supremacist ideology. So them using that as a shield is always a good thing, and I will always defend it.
Of course, and it's just this sad. I guess it's just this sad context of like Palestinians are so easily forgotten in many senses, and even in I will always remember Hossam Shabbat's name and many other journalists, Ismail Al-Ghul, who was killed, but there's so many Shireen Abu Akleh as well.
Yeah.
And all of these people, but there's so many others who were killed as well. And you just kind of think it's like this unfortunate thing of Israel, the way in which Israel just kills so indiscriminately. There are so many people whose names are so easily forgotten because Israel just does this constantly. And it's this really unfortunate thing of, in many ways, it kind of like, I don't know, we end up in this space in which it just feels like a lot of Palestinians were kind of just meant to die unless they're kind of like international superstars. And it's kind of like a criticism, I guess, of a more general thing. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm making any sense to you or what I'm saying, but it's just like,
no, I totally understand where you're coming from.
And it's not like a criticism of people, really. It's just an unfortunate kind of byproduct of the way Israel's genocidal crimes are so expansive.
Yeah. I mean, think about it this way. There was a photojournalist who was up for an award or was being considered for an award, and Israel assassinated her and her entire family literally after that announcement came down. I believe her name was Fatima. I can't remember her full name, but like it just happens so frequently. It just happens with great severity every single day, with great frequency every single day, that it's like it's almost impossible to keep up with.
Did you know that the guy who organized the Great March of Return, his family were targeted?
I did not know that.
So he's in an Al Jazeera documentary. It's actually very difficult to watch because he has like a very close relationship with you see him with like one of his sons, but he wrote about it. He writes about what was done to his family. He was like, why was my family targeted? He had no association with Hamas in the Al Jazeera documentary. He has a discussion with people who are like, we come to the Great March of Return, but we don't believe in it. We believe in like militant resistance against the state of Israel. And he's explaining to them, he's saying, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that. And he's giving his articulation, and his family home was targeted. No real explanation as to why. It just was, and it's kind of like this crazy thing of, if even like talking about pacifists, okay, he was targeted. Was he a good enough Anne Frank like character? He didn't resist, so is he the hero that we should look for? But he was killed, and people will now spend their time trying to tell you that a fucking border fence got attacked during the Great March of Return, so it was okay to snipe all those people.
Ethan did say that when he was talking to Sam Cedar, which I assume that's what you're pointing to.
Exactly, I was pointing to that and the fact that this is, really a talking point that has come up, especially since October the 7th, of trying to explain that the Great March of Return, a movement that was premised around the idea of what if Palestinians walked to the border fence and looked at their ancestral homelands and protested there. And, I know someone who was at them, and she spoke about what they were like and the level of violence that people experience. And one of the things that she spoke about specifically was the targeting of femurs. I believe it's femurs because it's the strongest bone in your body. And if it's destroyed, because the article talks about knees, but she was adamant that it was femurs that Israel targeted. And there are a lot of people with amputated legs from it, because if your femur bone is shattered really badly, your leg is basically done. And quite often in Gaza, it would just be amputated. And, it seems that Israel did this intentionally to people to basically cripple a generation of Palestinians who would then be unable to live. And you think about what kind of space Gaza is, where because it's so densely populated, you can only build upwards. That's no kind of life for a human being. That's no kind of life where there's not the adequate facilities. And now, like, think of the context of now, where it's a mess of rubble and just shit everywhere and constant moving on limbs that are, probably injured or harmed or might be infected. It's just all of these things. And I think again, it's once again this thing of like, death is not all that matters. There are so many people suffering in Palestine, and yet we have to hear an explanation about why it was okay to do that,
Yeah. It's it also reminds me of the most peace-seeking, in air quotes, Israeli official Yitzhak Rabin, and his process in the first Intifada, when he was in charge of interior security, the practice of breaking the bones of the Palestinian children who participated in the symbolic act of resistance of stone throwing. Like this became, during the first Intifada, this became like a symbolic act of resistance against these Israeli tanks and Israeli armored personnel carriers, and they would specifically demand to break bones, and they did successfully, to tens of thousands of kids during the first Intifada, and that was Yitzhak Rabin's policy. and he was seen as the most, he was seen as the closest that the Palestinians have ever gotten to a real peace agreement, and he was even assassinated for it by a far-right psychopath who was aligned with Itamar Ben-Gvir, and also even Benjamin Netanyahu actually wanted him to be assassinated as well, was making calls for his demise.
I have a feeling that Rabin's wife actually, to some extent, blamed Netanyahu for it, if I remember correctly. And
yeah,
I mean,
he responded to that by saying, "I would have beaten him anyway. I actually didn't want him to be killed because I was going to beat his ass," which is true. He's not wrong. He was going to beat him in the elections regardless because of the fucking peace process.
And there's also, this is a bit of an anecdote that comes from one of my lecturers who was an activist during the first Intifada. And one of the things that they spoke about was that they said, and there's not really much information online, and I'm not sure how you'd get this, it might only come up in Arabic, but she would always say that there's a trauma center in the West Bank that actually had to be founded after the first Intifada to deal with broken bones, because obviously if someone breaks your bones in a certain way and intentionally is doing, I mean, there's a video of it on YouTube of it being done. It does not look like a process that your legs are going to recover from. And if that's done to you, that's a serious traumatic injury that has lifelong consequences. And I always bring this up as someone who has I ruptured my ACL when I was younger. It's a minor injury, it can be fixed. But if I had someone to direct my anger towards, even having slight ire at a failure of a doctor to diagnose it quick enough and then it getting worse, having ire towards the person who has done that to you, who has given you a lifelong injury where you can directly blame it, you fester with that. Your entire life is defined by being shot by someone who wanted to do that for fun, who did that because you were peacefully protesting. It creates an anger that is within you, and we're expected to believe that there is a correct way for Palestinians to behave and such. It's kind of obscene. It is obscene,
I think what you described is also a testament to the resilience of the Palestinians for not even entertaining that level of justified vengeance at every waking moment of their lives. The very fact that there is even an entertainment of a two-state solution among the Palestinian population is a true testament to the humanity of Palestinians. But that also is usually the same throughout history. There's always the same fears that you hear from the colonial power or the white supremacists that in the aftermath or during the Reconstruction era were truly terrified that the abolition of slavery would change the dynamic, change the racial hierarchy in the South, and would cause black people, newly freed black men and women, to treat white people in the same way that white people had treated them. This, of course, has never happened throughout history, with, I guess, one notable exception of the Haitian Revolution that was very bloody in the aftermath. But outside of that, there has never been a moment where the liberated turned around and did the exact same kind of violence to those who had done tremendous violence to them. It just doesn't work that way.
And it would, for the Palestinians to inflict the same kind of violence, it wouldn't even be a specific event of singular violence. The structure of settler colonialism that has dispossessed them, that has kept them down, is in of itself incredibly violent. It may not be direct violence. I mean, I was talking about this in the context of Luigi Mangione. Is killing someone in the street not a great thing to be getting up to? But at the same time, who is the more violent person? The healthcare company that has inflicted a slow form of violence on millions of people, or the person who takes a singular act of violence? And to create a structure like Israel has, that is systemic violence of a benign kind in many cases, of ruining people's day-to-day existences.
Legalizing it's not even social murder at that point. It's just it's perfectly legal. Yeah, I mean, I guess social murder is perfectly legal as well, but.
It's just it's very difficult to see people tell me that October the 7th is this unimaginable act of barbarity, and that keeping human beings under apartheid, a recognized crime against humanity, is somehow not a kind of violence that deserves a greater condemnation or a contextualization of why October the 7th may exist. And this is something that Israelis themselves, there are people who say this. I'm pretty sure Gideon Levy said this pretty soon after October the 7th, that how can you not expect blowback? And he's not exactly a massively anti-Israel character, and there are an increasing number.
That was the Haaretz editorial. That was what was really interesting. I remember the Haaretz editorial board had the exact same, almost verbatim, exact same take that the Harvard student Palestinian youth movement had. And in the Western world, in the aftermath of October 7, Bill Ackman and numerous other very powerful figures that are now like permanent fixtures in the Trump administration, as a matter of fact, came out and demanded the doxing of these students for putting the burden and putting the responsibility, the culpability of October 7 directly in the hands of the violent ways in which the apartheid has unfolded upon the Palestinian population for 75 years at that point. It's crazy that there were so many crazy moments in the aftermath, in the immediate aftermath of October 7. I remember here in America where like they just straightforwardly, they had doxing trucks on college campuses that plastered the faces of students that wrote this op-ed claiming that they were like Hamas terrorists, like and demanded that they never get a job ever again. It's insane.
Of course, and I mean, I get bizarrely, it was actually the first ever video I made was talking about cancel culture and saying, hey, I actually think cancel culture is pretty fucking real if you talk about Palestine. If you talk about it, it is a major risk, and it is a cancel culture that is not going to win you like a major audience for after post October the 7th. You had a lot of people who have one video where they were like, hey, I was fired for my job on and talking about Palestine, and a lot of people will be interested in that, but then they won't be interested in what comes afterwards. It's not like Ricky Gervais or something, you know, where you get all these shows and doing a tour out of it. When it comes to Palestine, this is a serious threat to your career, and many people are scared to act in certain ways, to speak freely about a state that, you know, has perpetrated innumerable crimes, innumerable and crimes that I don't think most of us even know about, and ones that most of us will never even know about, because Israel has destroyed so much of the evidence and, you know, buried so many bodies.
Yeah. Also, this video that we're watching, while people might look at it as like simple drama or whatever, but like this is a direct participation in that exact same cancel culture structure that we're talking about, that one that has real repercussions, and maybe in this administration, as a matter of fact, one that might have criminal repercussions, because that's what the Trump administration wants to do. All right, let's keep going.
Posts from Israelis making fun of her by making pancakes with her face.
It doesn't work like that.
According to Al Jazeera, a report states the Israel-Palestine conflict to be the deadliest conflict ever for journalists. More journalists have been killed in Gaza than in both World Wars, Vietnam, Yugoslavia, and Afghanistan combined, says the Cost of War Project, with Israel's war on Gaza having 232 journalists.
But what?
He was.
And I will say it once again, CPJ stated that since the war began in 2023, this has been the deadliest period for journalists since the CPJ began gathering data in 1992. Ela seems to imply that critics are uninformed. Why would Ela so confidently believe that Israel wouldn't bat an eye with Hassan coming to Gaza as a journalist? He happens to be one of the most prominent critics of Israel and quite a large voice for Palestine. Could it possibly mean that you might have a more biased view of the country when you are from there and have lived there for many years of your life?
He's never been to Gaza, never been to Israel. He doesn't know shit about it.
No, he doesn't.
He does not. But he talks like with such authority. Oh my God.
Maybe. Then someone in the chat calls Ela a child, and she says it's crazy.
Bloodthirsty, vile children killers are dreaming about getting people killed. What a surprise.
What reality do they live in?
It's literally just a silly joke.
I mean, can we all agree that it was a mistake for Ela and Ethan to start reading chats from a Twitch streamer that they have been obsessively harassing? While the statement is incredibly hyperbolic, it does stem from the fact that
It's ironic because I also fucking ban people like that too. That's the other thing.
she served in the IOF, even if she had a non-combative role. And yet she continues to read the chat and start to infer that these people are just being anti-Semitic.
It's also like the Jews run everything kind of vibe I'm getting, because like, yeah, we'll send him to Israel and we'll get somebody to kill him.
But what could be the most shocking part in all of this is when Ela seems to be on the verge of revealing something she didn't intend to.
It's not a war zone, it's a genocide. Also, this is, if you want to know the constant stream of consciousness coming from Ethan Klein and Asmongold's audience, it's people like this that come in and say, yo, what's up, terror lovers? Sup, terror lovers? How big is your beheading spank bank, Hasan? I bet you love that shit. We ban this stuff on a regular basis. I'm only pointing to it right now because it just happened while we were looking at, Ethan and Gila reading shit that people are saying in the chat. Is this indicative of the overarching attitude that chat has? Probably not. I only have usually a 10-minute follow, but right now for this special occasion of a 60-minute follow. And as long as you follow for 60 minutes, you can actually talk. Now, I don't spend a whole deal of time talking about woe is me and look at me. I'm such a big victim, even though Islamophobia is a far more prevalent form of bigotry considered totally permissible in comparison to anti-Semitism, which is also a incredibly damaging bigotry and certainly exploding in popularity, especially as a byproduct of Israel's actions being packaged as being done at the behest of Judaism and defending the interests of all Jews. Having said that, however, there is no institutional allowance for anti-Semitism. Unless you're pro-Israel, then you can say whatever the fuck you want, as opposed to Islamophobia, a double standard that I constantly mention. And I think I might have mentioned with Ethan was, if you were to say someone should nuke Tel Aviv, you would get banned. And that's understandable to get banned for making a statement such as that. But if you were to say nuke Tehran or nuke Gaza, you can be American politician Randy Fine.
I mean, as well, it's always just this obsession with beheading and things like this to this effect. It's always an act that people view as so specifically evil, but Israel has desecrated the bodies of human beings in ways that cannot be compared to things done on October the 7th, like literally torn to shreds, where the point of view is literally just left in a bag regularly every single day is basically what it's been. But I mean, I think Edward Said said this years ago. Islamophobia is the only kind of bigotry that is not only acceptable but celebrated. It is a vote winner. It is a vote winner to blame Muslims for the ills of your society, whereas to talk about anti-Semitism, even for someone like Corbyn who was not anti-Semitic, it lost him in part, played a big role in him never being elected.
Yeah.
Which is just I mean, it's such an interesting topic.
Monster 1 and Female Monster 2.
Oh, it's not a war zone, so we can't say that it's a war zone? That's not woke enough?
He's going to say it's not a war zone, it's a killing field. Whatever.
No, that's what he's saying. It's not a war zone, it's genocide.
Okay, you can go...
Okay, call it whatever you want. It's dangerous, I admit that, right? So disgusting.
Hila seems like she is mocking or downplaying the fact that the situation is a genocide, as if calling it a genocide is just about semantics rather than acknowledging the reality of mass civilian casualties and displacement. So would Hila also mock the wording of these doctors that have seen it firsthand?
I've worked in a number of conflict zones in different parts of the world. I was there at the time of the Rwandan genocide. I've never seen anything on this scale, ever, and that was also the view of all the experienced colleagues that I worked with.
In northern Gaza, with the military offensive that's been happening by the Israeli forces there, we're seeing clear signs of ethnic cleansing as Palestinian people have been forcibly displaced, trapped, and then bombed.
Then Ethan's quick dismissal with,
okay, call it whatever you want. It's dangerous, I admit that. Right.
Reinforces this unwillingness to critically engage with a term, reducing a grave reality to a matter of preference rather than addressing its implications. After mocking Hasan for clarifying that it's not a war zone but a genocide, what are her thoughts on Holocaust survivor Arya Nair, who says this?
You have concluded that Israel is guilty of attempting genocide.
Yes.
That's a very heavy charge.
Yes.
This one is particularly important because not only is he the Human Rights Watch founder, but he also is a liberal Zionist who personally said in the immediate aftermath of October 7 that Israel's actions or October 7 and the harrowing nature of October 7 warranted like military action from Israel. This is him changing his perspective after Israel very openly and deliberately denied humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. So this was a dude who personally was on board with a military campaign sieges that have taken place prior, what some in Israeli politics calls mowing the lawn, operations such as that one, he saw that this was like a bridge too far.
So one could raise a question. Is Ela dissecting Hasan's every word because he's crowned the H3 podcast's mortal enemy? Or is there something else at play, like a deeper discomfort with anyone who speaks out for Palestine? Because when nearly every pro-Palestinian voice ends up labeled as anti-Semitic or a token Jew, it becomes a pattern. For example, there is Matt Lieb, a Jewish man himself, comedian and pro-Palestinian voice. Or, according to Ela and Ethan,
one of these guys who's like, he's Jewish, and he loves that because he allows himself to be tokenized to the max.
Yeah.
And in response to Matt Lieb's speech in a pro-Palestinian rally, Ela's feedback sounds like this.
You're not special for wanting peace. You know that, right?
Just keep in mind, guys, Ethan and Ela always pretend to stand for a peaceful solution. But even in a peaceful speech of a fellow Jewish man, they find something to mock. Is it because he speaks up for Palestine?
I am so proud to be marching with so many Jews and Gentiles of all ages, races, genders, and nationalities who are brave enough to demand an immediate ceasefire.
Yes, this man is so brave. Just speaking objectively, what is brave about what he's doing right now? He's
Who is
there
he demanding it from?
From question. I don't know.
Okay.
Karen Bassin? I don't know.
I'm not speaking to you as a representative of all Jews. I am a bad representative.
Why'd you even say that? It's like, bro, he's playing the token card.
Wait,
Crazy.
so you're saying that Jews don't want ceasefire?
No, he's doing a joke because he's a comedian. And he also is addressing the tokenization allegations by saying he's not here speaking on behalf of all Jews because he's a bad representative in general, because like for other unrelated reasons. Ethan is supposed to be a comedian. Interesting that he didn't understand what the joke was here.
No, he says, I'm not a
The joke is misdirection.
representative of all Jews because he's probably accused
Yeah,
of being
but
a
so
token.
far all he said that he wants ceasefire, but then that does not represent all Jewish people.
Well,
I'm the one that wants ceasefire, but not those other Jewish evil people. Like, what do you think everybody wants, dumbass?
That's not the argument he
I came
was
from
making.
a secular family, and the closest thing I got to a bar mitzvah is when I was 13, and I one time saw my dad send back soup for not being hot enough at the cafe in the Holocaust Museum. That was the thing that happened.
When does he start talking about how do we get ceasefire?
We're getting there, apparently. What a hack. He's a comedian, by the way. Quote unquote. He gave back soup at the Holocaust Museum.
Wow, you guys, so far you're so brave to be there and tell jokes and just
And the
get
Holocaust
applauded.
Museum.
Really brave.
Don't get me started on the Holocaust Museum. More like the Museum of Lies.
I like that. I like that they're simultaneously be like, oh, so brave, while also literally advocating for him to be fired. Demonstrating at least one point as to why it would require courage for people to come out and speak out against these sorts of things. Or even like getting ostracized from your community, like getting pushed aside from your community. A lot of young Jews in my community have talked to me about this when I've been to the encampments where, all right, they go to college, they're freshmen. They think they can join Hillel and like all these Jewish campus organizations. And every single one of these organizations is like super pro-Israel. So they're like, well, I'm an anti-Zionist. Like I have a hard time. Like I feel cast out from any sort of Jewish organization to be a part of. Like I can't, it feels like I'm lost in my own community. So there is definitely repercussions for that sort of thing, for that sort of moral courage that you're demonstrating. But every single person understands that regardless of being declared a pariah or the material consequences of speaking the truth about Israel, constantly having to deal with like people that want to fire you or deplatform you, as Ethan has done to me. It's nothing in comparison to the untold amount of violence that Palestinians are subjected to, and I think it's completely worthy to speak out against that, no matter what the repercussions are.
It's also very interesting that he's a token, but Ethan sharing Ahmed Fuad al-Khatib is not a token, who is someone who has made untold amounts of money and gained unamounts of prestige from solely being a Palestinian who speaks out, whereas Matt Lieb, is a person who's funny. Like, let's be honest, like that's the reason he's been, that people like him. He's funny, he says funny things, he makes funny content around Palestine-related stuff. And he's Jewish, and Peter.
And
that's
he couldn't
a thing
get
to
him fired
mention.
from Rhett and Link. Let's not forget from Good Mythical Morning, who he's a producer at, in spite Ethan's best attempts.
I mean, also for literally just talking to Bad Empanada, which I understand that Ethan may not like him, but as you've said, his videos related to Palestine are excellent. Like, he is probably one of the best person at making videos, like regardless of his behavior on other platforms and the way he can sort of conduct himself around certain aspects of this.
Oh yeah.
His content around Palestine is truly very, very, very good. Like very, very, very good. And he's very confident in himself, which is an impressive thing in terms of never backing down from actually just knowing that what he is saying is categorically correct, and all the people who are saying otherwise are morally reprehensible individuals.
Yeah, the issue is that he can do that because he has no interest in, like, I think, changing the minds of people living in the heart of empire, and doesn't recognize the importance of doing such a thing. And also, he's unimpeachable because he's in fucking Argentina and doesn't give a shit and doesn't have the same, I guess, legitimate threats that I withstand here in the United States of America. Or I suppose he just doesn't have as big as a platform too.
Are you talking more about like on a governmental level in terms of like?
Yeah,
or
I don't actually know. Maybe the Argentinian government will come after him. I don't know. I don't know how much protection he has in that regard. But
yeah, he's seemingly spoken about some of those things a little bit, but not too much to be. Well, I guess
I'm unfamiliar with the. I know he was targeted by the Argentine right wing. I know that.
Yeah. So he's spoken about things like that, but I assume it is a completely different thing. It's not the US government, And also, it's not. You're right. It's not a platform like yours. It's not a platform like yours where you are the biggest person. Someone who deplatforming of would be a massive indictment of the whole movement of saying like, hey, look at this person. Look, we've got the biggest head really of anyone who can do. Yeah. We can get on Twitch.
Like I got an article written in the New York Times, which Bad Empanada criticized because he said I'm a vehicle for packaging people into the Democratic Party. And for the record, like, yeah, I have never endorsed his behavior towards anyone, and have been often very critical of his mania in the way that he conducts himself. I think it unironically hurts his otherwise incredible, well-researched reporting on issues that pertain to Palestine, but like everything else, really, he's fantastic on that. Having said that, as soon as that New York Times reporting came out, of course, there is an endless sequence of hit piece after hit piece from Free Press. More slated to come out. The Fox News did a report on it yesterday. They see it as like an opportunity to pollute the SEO with like negative shit. And that only happens because this is a successful initiative overall. Like what I'm doing here is successful overall in terms of changing people's minds on this issue and many others. Like actively working to de-radicalize people. If it wasn't successful, if this platform wasn't so prominent, like I wouldn't get this level of negative attention. Sorry. Anyway, that's irrelevant here though in the video.
Actually, that's funnily not even. This guy's so fucked.
Well, we were at the stupid museum.
Yeah, I remember.
And I saw that you weren't interested, and I wasn't also.
It was the Holocaust Museum.
I do not represent all Jews. No single person represents all Jews, as no single state represents all Jews. Especially not the state of Israel.
This is another weird thing.
Oh
Israel
my God.
Israel. This is a lie that I see Hasan and people pander. They say that Israel's going to war on behalf of Judaism. They have never. I don't believe.
Are Matt Lieb's words so out of line as they portray?
That is the funniest thing that he says, where it's like, Israel's nation state for Jews law, the fact that it puts up menorahs in Gaza, the fact that they use the Star of David almost in the same way that the Nazis utilized the swastika at that point, and they put it on top of people's heads, Palestinian detainees' heads, that they use bulldozers to put Star of David's, like carve out on the face of the earth a Star of David in the middle of Gaza in a hollowed out like apartment complex. All of that we just are supposed to look at and say, no, these guys aren't trying to say Israel is the Jewish state, even though they say it every day. And also yelling at the people who decouple Judaism from Israel is additionally silly, constantly claiming that, all Jews are Zionists, all Jews are Zionists. When you say anything about Zionism, you mean all Jews. You're actually in a very sinister way doing anti-Semitism. That in and of itself is that exact same conflation that Ethan claims Israel is not doing.
It also goes beyond that as well, in the sense of Netanyahu openly claimed that this is a war for civilization. He claims that this is literally the heart of Western civilization, that this represents all Western civilization, in particular Jewish people, and that if it loses, the entirety of the West will be destroyed. So this idea that it doesn't claim to speak for all Jewish people, that it doesn't claim to speak for civilization as opposed to barbarism, is categorically untrue.
Yeah.
Let's listen to Holocaust survivor Stefan Kapos, who spent his childhood in hiding during the Nazi regime and lost 15 members of his family in the Holocaust. Here he talks in an interview from May 2024 where he says the exact same thing as Matt Lieb in his speech.
I say this as a Holocaust survivor, that the genocide in Gaza is not happening in my name and in our name.
So I know Ila was bored by the Holocaust Museum, but would she also push back against this Holocaust survivor for saying exactly what Matt Lieb did? That Israel doesn't speak for all Judaism. In Ila's eyes, Matt Lieb is doing a terrible job advocating for Palestine. This man is like a teddy bear. How can you tear apart a 2-minute fun and moving speech into a hateful 8-minute analysis? And sure, Ila says she wants peace. She said it herself.
Everybody's asking for a ceasefire. That's not brave. What do you mean? You want to be brave?
What does he think that I want and you want?
He said it. They say, and they want us. We want all Palestinians to die. That's what they say.
Why would anybody think that? When did I ever say anything like that? Indicate anything like that? And why would they think that anybody in Israel even wants that? Everybody just wants to move on and be able to live their life. Everybody wants peace. You're not special for wanting peace. You know that, right?
He's brave. Yeah, I love how he congratulates.
That's like the obvious take.
But if this is how she reacts to pro-Palestinian voices, then how much weight do her words really carry? They don't only go after public figures like Matt Lieb, but they also go for small content creators like this girl from TikTok. Out of respect for her privacy, I won't show her, but I will give a short summary on what her TikTok was. She describes a complicated and deeply emotional reaction towards her own Jewish community. She talks about seeing a group of Orthodox Jews, and her immediate thought wasn't just about shared identity, but about where they might stand on Israel's actions.
I don't want other Jewish people to think that I hate them, because that is not... It's not the case. I have lost so much faith in my own community, and I no longer feel this connection.
That internal conflict led to a moment of discomfort and even anger, not out of hatred for Jewish people, as she's really careful to clarify, but from frustration over the lack of support for Palestine. It's not about rejecting her identity, but about grappling with how it intersects with her morals and political stance. And this is how Ila's husband portrays the situation.
I saw this.
By the way, this is like, this is why Michael Jamal Brooks used to, rest in power, used to always say, my Jewish upbringing is what made me go against apartheid, what made me go against genocide, like the values that I learned, and the shared history that Jews have experienced is the reason why I condemn Israel. So that's the reason why it's like extra crazy for her to like struggle with this right here. And then, I guess let's see what Ethan's response is.
TikTok that blew my fucking mind. This girl, she's on a train in New York, and she's like, I saw these Orthodox Jews on the train, and the first thing I thought was, Are they Zionists? Get the fuck away from me. I'm like, you hate Jewish people. And that had like 160,000 likes on TikTok.
Wow.
So what am I supposed to think as a Jewish person when this is a celebrated opinion to be on a train with Jewish people and your first thought is, get the fuck away from me, without knowing a single thing about them, without talking about them.
A little bit of a misrepresentation.
That's anti-Semitism. I'm sorry to fucking spell it out.
That's an interesting take on her feelings. The host of Ila's podcast only missed all the context while she sat there with a raised eyebrow. Zero comment from her. Ironically, it was actually Ila who ended up echoing the very misrepresentation Ethan tried to push about the woman on TikTok.
I mean, I could take these guys a little bit more seriously if it wasn't for this curly ass shit. Like these fucking double curls.
Yeah, that is disgusting.
It's just...
Could you imagine what Ethan's response would be to someone like myself ever engaging in an act of like actual anti-Semitism such as this? Like, oh my God, he would be playing it over and over and over again to be like, look, you see, there it is.
It's goofy.
But also, come on, wearing a full suit in the summer.
You know what? Whatever, dude. Whatever they want to do is fine. But the
they
thing that...
stink the whole
Also,
place.
Chris, I know you're in Londonistan, which is the most Islamist place on the planet, of course. So if you're tired or if you need to leave because you want to go to bed or whatever, I hold no ill will on that.
I've definitely got a bit more left in me. Definitely.
All right, perfect. Okay, let's keep going then.
Labeling non-anti-Semitic people as anti-Semitic says more about the person doing the labeling than it does about the people being labeled. It also shifts the conversation away from the actual topic, Palestinian human rights, occupation, etc., and puts the focus on alleged bigotry. But that's convenient, right, Ila? No one is allowed to talk about it anymore. Everything is anti-Semitism, or as Ila calls it,
anti-Semitism.
And if it were up to you, you would also love to see Matt Lieb fired for daring to talk to someone who got to you by trolling and IDF soldiers in a video game. And if you justify your words with the alleged CPS call that was made to the Klein's house, who half of the internet is responsible for apparently, keep in mind that Matt Lieb had bad empanada on his show way before that happened, and
Also, he admitted that he has no idea who called CPS in our conversation, which I thought was like, I mean, yeah, that was also, again, drama focused, but like shocking in terms of just like openly revealing that he falsely claimed that every one of his ideological enemies that have called out his statements on Israel were actually responsible for the CPS call. And it turns out he just has no idea. He just said Snarkers did it on his story like 20 minutes ago. Okay, well, it's interesting because in my conversation he said, did I say the Snarkers called CPS, which he had done. And apparently now he's saying it again. He's saying that it was Snarkers once again.
I mean, also, it's just a kind of thing of just blaming other people, isn't it? It's just going to be easy to dismiss it. But also, Bad Empanada has clearly realized that the best way to kind of, I mean, he's openly said it, that he joked about it, but that Ethan Klein is the rent payer thing. Like, he's joked about it, but it's obviously just such an easy way to bait Ethan and Gila into talking about him, and also to get way more attention to his videos where he's just uploading talking about Palestine. And I understand I think obviously it's not a way I would do it at all in terms of the sense of like how, like of some of the things he says and does. But at the same time, it is like just an example of you can direct people to learning like things about Palestine and learning how to dismiss people who have really problematic views about Palestine by just, you know, winding people up basically about something that has nothing to do with him. Like, because it's obvious that it doesn't.
Yeah.
So that YouTube is full of compilations of you guys harassing everyone left and right. Another instance of Ila using her words to show her deep-rooted empathy of the suffering of Palestinians is during the H3's Cope stream for Trump's inauguration day.
Just the other day, Bibi fired a really good guy that a lot of people are pissed about, and he fired him because they had a disagreement, and that's like so Trump-coded.
Now, I know Ila doesn't like to hear.
But she lived in Israel. She's obviously the most knowledgeable. I don't understand. Like, how could she have said, as someone who is against Israel's violence, how could she have said the defense minister during October 7, who in the immediate aftermath of October 7 said, we must shut off their electricity, their food, their water. We are fighting human animals. How could she have thought that he was a good guy, especially considering that at this point, he had already had a warrant out for his arrest for being a war criminal?
Yeah, I find it particularly difficult to believe that neither of them knew who he was. I mean, Ethan clearly doesn't in the clip, but I think that they know. And also, I've seen people defend it on the basis of, well, he did want to end the war, but he wanted to end it because Israel had done enough genocide, in his opinion, that they'd achieved all they could, that there was no more point to the genocide.
Yeah.
It didn't come from like good of his
mention
heart.
this because, in their opinion, they have dealt with the situation accordingly and put it to the books.
Narc's greatest hits.
Yeah, it
this
is.
is Narc's greatest hits.
Let's look into this a little deeper, and whilst we do that, keep in mind how she repeatedly tries to discredit the opinions of non-Israeli people who speak on the matter.
I think Ethan has a lot of credibility to talk about it. He lived there for 5 years and he's married to an Israeli.
No, you care about.
It's not funny to like sit in America and think that you know better than somebody who lives in Israel.
Yoav Gallant was a military officer that served as Israel's Minister of Defense and was also the same guy that said that he had ordered a complete siege on the Gaza Strip. There will be no electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. Everything is closed, we are fighting human animals, and we are acting accordingly. Gallant's declaration of a complete siege where
Just good guy things, you know, even from the most like liberalized brain rot Marvel Cinematic Universe ass of like approaching politics, like that's not what a good guy would say. I don't think, you know, that's what a really good guy would say, like the best guy actually.
But also I think it's thinking about, you know, you mentioned how you use your platform to Ethan. You know, you think that you might know who this guy is if you cared about the Gaza genocide from talking about saying, hey, this is a pretty... Like, one of the things Ilan Pape always brings up as one of the reasons he's somewhat hopeful about, you know, what's happening in Palestine is he said, if you had told me or any other expert of what's going on in the about Palestine, that even in 2010, that one day Israel would be brought before the ICJ or even the ICC. Yeah. If you told me those things, I would be shocked. I wouldn't believe those words coming out of your mouth because there's no way they would, because they're protected. And to have just, you know, to be someone who says that you've dealt with Palestine when you know, that neither of you even knew that he'd maybe said that allegedly, you know? And Ethan also defended it on his story 100%. He said that something about like him wanting to end the war, and it was in the context of October the 7th, so it was okay to say, in spite of the fact that, you know, it wasn't just a statement. They did starve Gaza. They did turn the energy, the electricity and such off.
Yeah.
Cuts off all of these necessities amounts to collective punishment, which points to a potential breach of Geneva Conventions.
I don't think you guys understand Israel. It doesn't work like that.
Calling an entire population human animals is deeply disturbing.
A really good guy did it.
Dehumanization is a key tactic used to justify ethnic cleansing.
Shouldn't have used that word. That was a bad choice.
Alas, Ethan would soon find the error of their ways and created an apology video for this wrongful judgment. Now, usually, apology videos are titled things like this. So what title do you think Ela and Ethan chose for their video? Here are 4 options. What do you think it's gonna be? Making things right, let's move on, oops, I just like the vibes, I'm suing. Which of these very realistic titles is going to be the title for the video where they apologize for the mistake of calling Yoav Gallant?
Okay, I'm gonna go, I'm suing. That's.
I think it's I'm suing as well.
That's what I think. The answer is yes. The video where you can find Ela apologizing and explaining why she said Yoav Gallant, a far-right genocide enabler, was a great guy, is titled Hasan is a Weaselly Little Liar. The stuff writes itself. So let's have a look at Ela addressing this error.
Hello. I'm here to address something that happened on Thursday's show. We were doing our post-election cope.
I genuinely don't understand how his fan base doesn't recognize what the fuck's going on at that point, where it's just like, how do you look at this? How do you look at this and go like, yeah, no, this is normal and not an unhealthy obsession. It's like if every single time I was attacked by like Fox News, and some fans in my community have tried to say like, no, Ethan is the reason why Fox News is attacking you. And I'm like, no, I don't think that's the case. I think they're attacking me because New York Times wrote a positive report on me. I'm sure they'll use Ethan's commentary in the process, but I don't think he is the figure, the shadowy figure guiding these things, right? It's because like there is a militant Hasbara operation in a network of newspapers in the West that will immediately tackle any kind of positive sentiment demonstrated towards someone who has expressed negative feelings towards the state of Israel. That's it. And like, imagine every time I get criticized, though, I was like, Ethan is so much worse or something. I don't know. Ethan is doing this.
I mean, also, I guess it's just the fact of like, yesterday he was trying to call you a liar over and over again, and I'm not really quite sure as to what you'd actually lied about, as to what these serious lies are.
Yeah,
and
especially
just
because he openly admitted that he was wrong and he lied himself about me.
Yeah, of course, and the amount of lies and the amount of just things that are said and just done over and over again without willingness to take accountability. Yet when a debater is in front of him, someone who actually knows what he's talking about, he doesn't care. He doesn't care. He can just admit it then and never confront the criticism. And actually, the thing I wanted to mention because I kind of forgot for a second, is it's kind of the dangerous part, though, isn't it? When you're telling your audience how beautiful and multicultural Israel is, and they are willing to believe anything you say or do, no matter how much it's just clearly not very congruent with the truth. Kind of shows you why it might be quite a dangerous thing to not really speak very critically of Israel.
Yeah.
Stream. And
okay, hold on a second. Where is Ela? Why do we have this guy talking about this when Ela was the one that said
a really good guy?
Cabinet, who just yesterday was fired by Netanyahu because he wanted to end the war. And Netanyahu wants to continue the war, and therefore he fired him. Once he was fired, people in Israel took to the streets and are protesting, being a good thing.
Okay, here is when she comes out to talk. We are 4 minutes in. Now, I'm just gonna put this over here, and okay.
I feel like the reason I brought it up was mainly to express the frustration with Bibi and him firing the one guy that was somewhat, attempting at moderation. It wasn't really so much to say Gallant is a good guy. I shouldn't have used that word. That was a bad choice on my part, considering stuff that he has said that I was not even thinking of. Really coming from the concerning feeling of like, we have Trump in office and Bibi just fired the guy that is opposing him. That's all I was trying to say, but I do understand that was not a good choice of words and I would not have said that again. So I'm stepping away for a little while from being on camera and being on the podcast. It's too much and it's not fair for everybody. And yeah.
So, 52 seconds and 96 milliseconds of Ela apologizing. She's gone now, and we're 5 minutes in. The video is 14 minutes long. What could you possibly be talking about? Oh, right. The video is called Hassan Piker is a Weasley. Okay.
What a fucking liar, dude.
Yeah, never mind. But if you can spend hours on a podcast but can't even take more than a minute to sincerely address your mistake and be the one that explains the error, it just makes you such a qualified speaker on the topic. And then this guy,
little fucking liar,
to explain your wrongdoing, it doesn't look like a good time to outsource accountability. Kudos to H3 for recognizing that you just praised the genocide enabler. From all the feedback you received from the people, that's a thumbs up on their video from me. However, the explanation for this error sort of exposes their neglect in informing themselves of what's going on. This is what Ethan says before Ela makes her appearance.
Later, for whatever reason, this is the same guy who's advocating for the war to end in Israel. And Ela, looking over the news, sees that people are rioting, that people are upset, and that people who want the war to end are upset that he got fired, and that's basically all that happened. We're talking about the fact that he's the only person that wants to end the war.
Yeah,
and
he's the only person, and that wasn't even the major point of contention. It was actually, I believe, the Haredi conscription that was a big deal. It wasn't actually. I might be mixing up my stories at this point because I've been covering this. I've been covering this genocide every single day, but I'm fairly certain that a big part of the reason. A big part of the reason was because of the Haredi conscript situation.
I think that there was even just from a quick Google, from what you're saying as well. I remember that being the case. That there's a big point around this because it's a big point of contention in Israeli society. That's obviously not of the main interest to most people when it comes to understanding it. It's like something that most people don't know about or are not that interested in. But I think you're right that it's something that they played at least a decent sized part in why he was removed.
Yeah, he was also talking about invading Lebanon. Yoav Gallant was in favor of invading Lebanon, and also wanted to bring in the Haredis into forced conscription, even though they've had peaceful not peaceful. Sorry, what the fuck am I saying? Even though they have religious exemption because they're supposed to be doing religious studies. You really are a piece of shit, lol. Explain to me in a couple words why I'm a piece of shit. Really quickly, you have the floor. Now that we also have a guest on board as well, I would like to hear your take, Sebson. Following since 3 hours ago, unfollowed, and then back at it. But yeah, what I was gonna say is, if you want to know more about the Haredi situation, it's because it's because they get religious exemption. A lot of Israeli society actually considers that to be ridiculous. They think that like the Orthodox communities or the settler communities especially are like welfare queens that don't give anything back to Israeli society and only take. That's like one of the reasons as to why they have resentment towards them. And Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition relies on the Haredi parties. Disingenuous liar. Okay. About what? That's not an explanation. Sorry.
I think generally they also pay way less tax and tend to have more children. And so most people in Israeli society, as you say, view them as welfare queens,
Yeah.
Because they're not paying taxes. They don't do anything. And a lot of people as well, it's interesting. Ilan talks about this stuff that on the other hand, they view the secular Jewish state as they call it the Messiah's donkey. They think it will bring about the end times. But they also think that they're like basically stupid because they don't believe the same things as them. So it's an interesting dynamic and obviously something that most people aren't particularly interested in.
Yeah. Okay, let's continue.
Don't understand how that's not relevant. Here from The Guardian, a left-leaning newspaper you guys all probably know. Here's a headline. Benjamin Netanyahu fires Defense Minister Yoav Gallant.
I don't doubt Ela and Ethan would like for the war to end. She was operating off of the fact that this man had stated he wishes the war to end. But what does this say about how you read news articles and interpret them? Because from what Ethan said on behalf of Ela here, it sounds as if they're just reading headlines and calling it a day. And what was that about a certain someone that doesn't know a thing about this conflict?
He doesn't know shit about that conflict. He's never been to Gaza, never been to Israel. He doesn't know shit about it.
No, he doesn't.
He does not.
However, when confronted with this topic and moment once again in iDubbbz's Content Cop video, she seems to have a different reason as to why she said that.
I want to explain it because people bring it up non-stop. I apologize for it right away. When Ethan made a video to address this on his Ethan Klein channel,
Next day, I
made a quick appearance in that video just to say, I'm sorry, I misspoke. I shouldn't have called him a really good guy. Like, I don't know why I said it like that. The point I was just trying to make is that Bibi fired him because they were disagreeing.
Here, you don't need to paraphrase it. Let's watch it.
Yeah, why do you have to cut her off, dude? Let her cook. Okay, that's quite different from your explanation when you apologized. Ethan said that she was just reading headlines saying that they want the war to end. Ela then said that he was the only one that attempted moderation. And now she says that the point she was trying to make was that Netanyahu fired him because they were disagreeing. What were they disagreeing on? Let's take a look at the point she was trying to make in the original video.
He looked mean. I thought he was mean just because he looked mean.
No. Well, the big disagreement was that people are fighting for the Orthodox Jews to get drafted as well to the army because they're not.
Motherfuckers.
Wait, so she does know more than she's letting on.
But Israel...
That's an issue?
Yeah, the Orthodox don't serve.
They don't serve.
Yeah, it's like Amish people, too. They don't do that.
But everybody else has to. Everybody has to do it.
Sure.
So it's like, what the fuck?
Dude, the Orthodox are such leeches there.
Oh, you think Orthodox Jews in Israel
don't
serve? I thought that like everyone had to.
Exactly, except the Orthodox.
And then the Orthodox.
I like that. I'm glad that you and I just had this conversation before this moment to describe in detail like what the actual dynamic looked like, and also simultaneously explain how like some liberal Zionists or like some people in Israel actually consider them to be leeches and welfare queens and all this stuff. And well, turns out there it is. They're doing it. They're doing the thing that I was saying.
Because they need to sit and pray for God all day.
Never mind, it's a dislike now. So just to be clear, Ila's concern is not that people are being conscripted into a violent occupation, but that some people get to skip the uniform and stay home to pray. The framing is not so much about systemic inequality, and appears to be more about wanting broader participation in Israel's military forces. The same.
And for the record, before people say like, oh, they're being anti-Semitic or whatever, or their take on this, the only reason why I take issue with their perspective is exactly what this guy, the soft take, is presenting, which is that it's ridiculous to be like, well, how dare they don't get to serve? Like, how dare they behave like leeches or whatever? I don't necessarily find myself in defense of some of the more fundamentalist elements within Israeli society. Let's be real. It's doubly ironic, of course, because I very famously call all kinds of different right-wing reactionaries inbred, which was what Ethan claimed I was doing in an anti-Semitic manner towards the ultra-Orthodox settlers that were destroying humanitarian aid going into Gaza, which Ethan said were just a bunch of wonderful fellows that are like, why? These guys look like they're holding they're holding up aid boxes and moving them into the Gaza Strip to do delivery of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. How dare Hasan imply that they're right-wing and bad, and also say that they look like volunteers, he said. Well, perhaps it's because I don't get my opinions off of 30-second fucking clips, and instead was reacting to a news report about them doing exactly what I'm saying, which is destroying humanitarian aid.
It's also very interesting that I guess I sometimes think about things that when I see other people bringing up stuff that I hadn't. Very interesting to see that clip in its full sort of context, because I've seen it so many times, but I've never seen it where Hila clearly does actually know, this is to do with, probably the more niche part, the sort of ultra-Orthodox conscription, but has apparently, she was just thought he was a good guy because of being a moderating voice. It seems she's much more interested in Israeli societal issues than, his genocide opinions.
Yeah.
Military force that likes to go on social media and post stuff inside of Palestine.
By the way, you're doing tremendous PR for British people. I just saw someone in the chat go, this guy is the coolest fucking Brit I've ever met. You're doing incredible PR for the island.
I'm glad. What do they all say? Is it three head that they all say at the beginning?
Yeah, free head lad. That's right. Fucking hell.
I'm hoping to change the chat's perception vis-a-vis free heads.
This is actually this is a British Angloid Hasbara right here. That's what it is. You're doing PR.
Palestinian homes like this, and also this. It's quite telling that Ila's complaint wasn't, why do people have to serve in a military accused of war crimes, but instead, why doesn't everyone have to? Let's go back in time to a podcast episode in 2017 where Ila recounts her time served in the Israeli military that is renowned for headlines like this, and this, and this. And not once has she shown remorse for being part of it, or I at least couldn't find a single clip. If it exists, please let me know in the comments and I will do right by it. Let's take a closer look to show you what I mean by having no remorse for it. Ila was born in Tel Aviv. In the podcast episode featuring Ila, she explained that she attended the mandatory IOF service from around 2005 to 2007, I assume. The other option, according to them on the podcast, would have been 6 months in prison. She met Ethan while he attended a heritage trip fully paid for by, to quote Ethan, rich Jews from around the world to connect with fellow Israelis to get married. A very Zionistic event, as Ethan stated. But he didn't really care about that back then, and Ila was still part of the IOF back then. Eventually, she and Ethan lived in Israel together for 5 years before they moved together to America. In those years, Ila wanted to attend art school but got declined and applied again a year later. Why is this in my script? Ila proceeds to talk about how her military service began.
How was your experience in the military?
It was okay. It happened right after there was some kind of a second war in, where was it, in Gaza?
I remember that, yeah.
There was some sort of a small war.
Yeah.
When I was there, and
as we can see, she doesn't seem to even know what war this was, and referred to it as a small war. The small war Hila is talking about is known as the Second Intifada.
Wait,
and just
no, I thought it was like I thought she was referencing like I don't know, one of the. I mean, it doesn't matter, even if they were talking about like any of the sieges that has taken place. Which I guess would be like closer, so the timeline doesn't add up. But I never even thought that. Oh my God! It was during it was after the Second Intifada. That's crazy.
Yeah, I think I was considering putting this in my video talking about it. It is really interesting that she didn't even know what it was. I just think it's kind of mad that you'd serve in a military like off the back of that, you know, and just have no idea what anything that they do, anything that you're doing is kind of pretty. It's pretty wild.
That's what the timeline matches up with, like the Second Intifada. Is that?
Yeah, it does. I think Hila's born like I spent some time looking into this. I think she served in about, as he said, 2005, late 2005, early 2006.
Oh, she was 18 in 2005. So yeah, it's like at the okay. Like okay, right on the heels of the Second Intifada. That's crazy.
Yeah. And also, by the way, as I have noted, that although it was much more militant, the vast way that the way that the vast majority of people participated was still through non-violent actions. Yes, there was definitely targeting of civilians inside even Israel proper. However, the vast majority of people still participated through non-violent methods. That is what Andy Clarno says, and he says that is what people, because of course people protested and such. You know, people didn't just all engage in militancy.
Yeah, and of course, if you look at the numbers, as is the case with the asymmetry of Israel's retaliation, the numbers do not favor Israeli restraint. Any sort of argument towards Israel being restrained in this circumstance.
No, of course, and it's kind of this interesting thing about how now the Intifada is a word that is meant to mean like Jewish suffering as opposed to Palestinian attempts at liberation that were brutally thwarted.
Or just the Arabic word for uprising, which in Arabic is like the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising is called the Warsaw Ghetto Intifada. Like, that's what this is, isn't it?
The only thing that it might be is there is one, my friend just texted me because we spoke a lot about this. There is one in 2006 called Operation Summer Rain, which it could have been if she was talking about just Gaza, just to clarify, which is the one to do with, I think, Gilad Shalit when he was captured, because that's in June 2006. So I think that my friend checked this and she actually said that quite possibly there is a 2006 Gaza-Israel confrontation. So it might be that. And I mean, even then, it's still like hundreds of civilians killed. Apparently 270 militants and such.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, even if it's like a little war, like what she is casting aside is like a little war in one of the many different sieges that we're talking about is so bloody and so consequential for the Palestinian population, as always.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, of course.
It's nothing to just like cast aside is what I mean. You can only do that if you're like, like no one in Israel will ever forget October 7. You know what I mean? They're not going to be like, oh yeah, it's just like a little thing. It's just like, they wouldn't be like, oh, there was a little bit of militancy or something, like when referring to October 7. Whereas Israel has done October 7 plus on numerous occasions of the Palestinian population. And it's so commonplace and so a normal part of Israeli existence that like she can't even fucking recall